It is 3 in the morning, and the world outside is quiet, but in the small dark room, a storm is raging. Not a storm of wind or rain, but a silent, internal whirlwind of thoughts. You lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, your body tired, but your mind painfully awake. A list of tomorrow's tasks chases a memory of yesterday's failures. A wave of anxiety about the future crashes against a rock of regret for the past. There is a deep, hollow ache in your chest, a feeling of being fundamentally unsettled. You reach for your phone, its cool blue light, a familiar, false comfort. You scroll and scroll through the curated lives of others, through headlines of chaos and division, through a river of information that promises connection but delivers only a deeper sense of isolation. This is the quiet suffering of the modern age. It is not the dramatic pain of an open wound, but the persistent, low-grade fever of the soul. It is the feeling of being trapped on a hamster wheel, running faster and faster, accumulating more, achieving more, only to find that the scenery never changes and the feeling of emptiness remains. We have built a world of unprecedented convenience and material wealth, yet we feel a profound spiritual poverty. We are more connected than ever, yet we have never been more alone. This is the modern expression of an ancient truth, a truth the Buddha called dukkha, the fundamental unsatisfactoriness of a life lived on autopilot, a life disconnected from its own heart. But there is an alternative. There is a path that does not ask you to run away from the world, but to walk deeper into it. A path that does not offer an escape, but a way to come home to yourself. It is a path that has been walked for over 2,500 years. A quiet wisdom passed down through generations, not as a dogmatic religion, but as a practical science of the mind. It begins not with a grand gesture, but with the two simplest, most fundamental actions available to every human being. The first is to breathe. The second is to let go. These are the keys. They are the tools we will use, together, to navigate the storm, to soothe the aching heart, and to uncover the unshakable peace that lies waiting, patiently, beneath all the noise. To begin this journey, we must first have the courage to look directly at the nature of our own hearts, at the feeling that sits quietly beneath the surface of our busy lives. We gave it a name earlier, a word from the ancient Pali language, dukkha. When this word is translated into English, it is often given the single, heavy label of suffering. And while dukkha certainly includes suffering, the great pains of loss, sickness, and grief, its meaning is far more subtle, far more pervasive, and far more relevant to the quiet desperation of our modern lives. To truly understand it, it is better to think of dukkha not as a gaping wound, but as a constant, low-grade ache. It is the feeling of a wheel that is just slightly off-center, causing a subtle but persistent vibration on even the smoothest of roads. It is the stone in your shoe that is too small to stop for, but which makes every step just a little bit uncomfortable. Dukkha is the fundamental human condition of unsatisfactoriness, the feeling that something is not quite right, the sense that no matter what we achieve, acquire, or experience, it is never, ever truly enough to fill the void within. This is the hum of anxiety that underscores our careers, the pressure to constantly climb, to prove our worth through titles and salaries. The job is no longer just a way to provide for our families. It has become the primary measure of our identity. And so we carry the office with us in our pockets. We answer emails late at night. We sacrifice our peace for a promotion that, once attained, reveals yet another ladder we are expected to climb. This is dukkha, It is the silent loneliness we feel while scrolling through the highlight reels of other people's lives, comparing their curated moments of joy with the messy, unedited reality of our own existence. We see the vacation, not the debt it created. We see the happy couple, not the argument they had just before the photo was taken. We are surrounded by images of connection, yet we feel profoundly unseen. This is dukkha. It is the exhaustion that comes from living in a world of endless choice and constant information. Our minds, never given a moment to rest, are pulled in 1,000 different directions by notifications, headlines, advertisements, and the demanding opinions of others. We are overfed with data, but starved of meaning. This feeling, this pervasive stress, this sense of being a stranger in your own life is not a personal failure. It is not a sign that you are broken or that you are doing something wrong. It is the shared experience of a humanity that has forgotten how to be still. To acknowledge this, dukkha is the very first step. It is not an act of pessimism. It is an act of profound realism and compassion. You cannot heal a sickness you refuse to name by daring to say, yes, there is a fundamental unease here. You move from being a passive victim of your circumstances to an active participant in your own healing. To illustrate the most crucial aspect of this truth, the Buddha told a simple story, a parable of 2 arrows. Imagine you are walking through a forest, and suddenly you are struck by an arrow. The physical pain is immediate, sharp, and undeniable. This first arrow is an unavoidable part of life. In our lives, this arrow can take many forms. It can be the pain of a sudden illness, the sting of a harsh criticism from someone you respect, the grief of losing a job, the shock of a relationship ending. These events happen. They are painful. They are, to a large extent, outside of our control. This is the first arrow. It is pain. Now, for most of us, the story does not end there. After being struck by the first arrow, we often proceed to do something quite strange. We take out a second arrow and we shoot ourselves with it, right in the same spot. This second arrow is our reaction to the first. It is the story we tell ourselves about the pain. The first arrow hits, and we think, why me? This is a catastrophe. I am a failure. My life is ruined. I will never recover from this. We add layers of anger, fear, resentment, self-pity, and blame on top of the initial, clean pain. This is the second arrow, and this, the Buddha taught, is suffering. The first arrow is the objective event. The second arrow is our subjective interpretation of that event. The first arrow is inevitable. The second arrow is optional. The entire path of spiritual practice, the entire journey toward inner peace, is not about developing some magical shield to stop the first arrows of life. They will always fly. The world is, by its nature, filled with pleasant and unpleasant experiences. We will all face sickness, old age, and death. We will all face loss, disappointment, and injustice. No amount of meditation or positive thinking can make us immune to the first arrow. The true work lies in learning not to shoot the second one. This is where our power lies. This is where our freedom is found. Consider a moment of simple physical pain, a headache. The headache itself is the first arrow. It is an unpleasant physical sensation. The second arrow is the mental commentary. Oh no, a headache. I won't be able to get any work done. This is going to ruin my whole day. What if it's a symptom of something serious? The initial pain of the headache is multiplied tenfold by this storm of anxious thoughts. Or consider a criticism at work. The words themselves are the first arrow. The second arrow is the internal spiral. My boss thinks I'm incompetent. I'm probably going to get fired. I'm not good enough for this job. Everyone else is better than me. The initial sting of the criticism becomes a deep wound of insecurity and fear, all because of the second arrow we have fired into ourselves. This is the mechanism by which our minds create suffering. Our untrained mind is an amplifier. It takes the spark of a painful event and, by pouring the gasoline of our reactive thoughts and emotions onto it, turns it into a raging forest fire of anxiety and despair. The suffering is not in the event itself, but in our resistance to it, in our story about it. To see this clearly is to stand at a major crossroads. It is to realize that while we may not be the masters of our circumstances, we can become the masters of our responses. To name dukkha, to see its workings through the parable of the two arrows, is to finally understand the real nature of the problem. It is not the world that needs to be fixed. It is not our life that needs to be perfect. The work is internal. The challenge is to train the mind so that when the first arrow strikes, we can have the wisdom and the stability to simply care for the wound, without reaching into our quiver for that second, self-inflicted arrow of suffering. This realization is the beginning of true wisdom. It shifts the focus from blaming the world to cultivating the heart. It shows us that freedom is possible. But to do this, to catch ourselves in that crucial moment between the first and second arrow, we need an anchor. We need a place of refuge, a calm center in the storm of our own reactivity. We need a tool to ground us in reality, to pull us out of the catastrophic stories of the mind and into the simple truth of the present moment. That tool is the foundation of this entire path. It is free, it is portable, and it is available to you in every single moment of your life. It is your own breath. We have seen how the mind, through the mechanism of the second arrow, becomes the architect of its own suffering. We have named the pervasive unease of our lives dukkha. This diagnosis, while sobering, is the beginning of hope, because it points towards a solution that lies not in changing the world, but in transforming our relationship to it. But to do this, to create a space between the first arrow of life's painful events and the second arrow of our habitual reaction, we need an anchor. A ship tossed in a raging storm cannot redirect its course until it first finds a way to stop being thrown about by every wave. It needs to drop an anchor, to find stability, to find a moment of stillness amidst the chaos. For our minds, constantly tossed on the waves of thought, memory, and emotion, that anchor is the breath. It seems too simple, too obvious to be the key to profound transformation. We take over 20,000 breaths a day, each one an unconscious, automatic process. But within this simple, repetitive rhythm lies the most powerful tool for grounding ourselves in reality and reclaiming our inner peace. This practice is known as anapanasati, which simply means mindfulness of breathing. The power of the breath lies in its absolute honesty and its unwavering connection to the present moment. Your mind can travel to the distant past, replaying old conversations and nursing old wounds. Your mind can rocket into the future, constructing elaborate scenarios of success and disaster, but your breath can only be here, now. You cannot take a breath that is in the past. You cannot take a breath that is yet to come. To bring your awareness to the sensation of breathing is to gently but firmly pull the mind back from the imaginary worlds of yesterday and tomorrow and anchor it in the living reality of this very moment. The breath is the bridge between our physical body and our conscious mind. It is a perfect, real-time reflection of our inner state. When you are frightened or angry, your breath becomes shallow, rapid, and tight. When you are relaxed and at peace, your breath is naturally deep, slow, and soft. It never lies. By learning to observe the breath without judgment, we are really learning to observe ourselves with the same unconditional acceptance. We are learning to listen to the body's wisdom, to hear its subtle signals before they escalate into the full-blown crisis of a second arrow. This is not about controlling the breath. It is about befriending it. It is about treating it as a loyal companion who has been with you since the moment of your birth and will stay with you until the moment of your death, always ready to offer you a refuge from the storms of the mind. So, let us explore how to drop this anchor. You do not need a special cushion or a silent monastery. You can do this right now, wherever you are. Find a posture that embodies both dignity and ease. You can sit in a chair with your feet flat on the floor and your spine straight, but not rigid. You can sit on the floor, on a cushion, with your legs crossed, comfortably. The important thing is to create a physical posture that tells your mind you are doing something intentional, yet relaxed. Allow your hands to rest in your lap or on your knees, and then, gently, you can allow your eyes to close. Or, if you prefer, you can leave them slightly open, with a soft, unfocused gaze directed towards the floor a few feet in front of you. Now, bring your attention to the fact that you are breathing. That is all. There is no need to change your breath in any way. You are not trying to breathe deeply. You are not trying to make it more spiritual or special. The invitation is simply to feel the breath as it already is. Let the body breathe itself. Your only task is to watch, to witness. To help stabilize your attention, you can choose one specific spot to rest your awareness. For some, this is the tip of the nostrils. You can feel the subtle sensation of the cool air entering as you breathe in, and the slightly warmer air passing over the same spot as you breathe out. Rest your attention there, as lightly as a butterfly resting on a flower. For others, a better anchor point is the abdomen. Place your awareness on your belly and feel the gentle, rhythmic rising on the in-breath and the gentle falling on the out-breath. Rise and fall. Rise and fall. Choose whichever anchor point feels most natural to you, and for the next few moments, simply rest there. Now, something very important will happen. It is not a question of if, but when. Your mind will wander. It will be pulled away by a thought, a sound, a memory, a plan. One moment you are with the breath, and the next you are thinking about what to have for dinner, or replaying a conversation from yesterday. This is not a failure. It is not a mistake. It is simply the nature of the untrained mind. The true practice, the moment of mindfulness, is not in preventing the mind from wandering. The practice is the moment you realize it has wandered. In that moment of realizing, you have already woken up. And what do you do then? You don't scold yourself. You don't get frustrated. You simply and kindly acknowledge where the mind has gone, and then, with infinite gentleness, you guide it back to your anchor, back to the sensation of the breath. Each time you do this, you are strengthening your muscle of mindfulness. The return is the practice. There is a wonderful old story that perfectly illustrates this process. Imagine a farmer who has just caught a wild, powerful water buffalo. This buffalo represents our mind, full of untamed energy, ingrained habits, and restless desires. The farmer knows he cannot tame the buffalo by fighting it directly. So, he drives a strong, heavy stake deep into the earth. This stake represents the present moment, anchored in the sensations of the body. Then, he takes a sturdy rope, which represents the practice of mindful breathing, and he ties the buffalo to the stake. At first, the buffalo is enraged. It pulls and strains, running to the very end of the rope, trying to break free. It rears up and bellows, crashing against the limits of the rope again and again. This is like our mind when we first try to meditate. It feels trapped, agitated, and restless. It pulls towards every thought, every distraction. But the farmer is patient. He knows the stake is strong and the rope is secure. He simply waits. After some time, the buffalo becomes exhausted. It realizes its struggle is useless. It can go no further than the length of the rope. And so, it finally lies down near the stake. It is still a powerful, magnificent buffalo, but its wild, destructive energy has subsided. It has found a strange kind of peace within its small circle of freedom. Our mind is just like this buffalo. By repeatedly and gently bringing it back to the anchor of the breath, we are not destroying its energy. We are simply taming it, allowing it to find its own natural state of rest and clarity right here, in the present moment. This ancient practice is now being validated by modern science. We know that our nervous system has two main branches. The sympathetic nervous system is our fight or flight response, our internal accelerator. It floods us with adrenaline and cortisol, preparing us to face a perceived threat. Modern life, with its constant demands and pressures, often has this system stuck in the on position. The parasympathetic nervous system is our rest and digest system, our internal break. It promotes calm, healing, and restoration. The simple act of conscious breathing, of paying gentle attention to the in-breath and the out-breath, is one of the most direct and effective ways to manually engage this parasympathetic system. It sends a powerful signal from the body to the brain that says, "You are safe. The threat has passed. You can stand down." The heart rate slows, blood pressure drops, and the entire body begins to shift out of a state of alarm and into a state of ease. This is the simple, profound magic of the breath. It is the first step in learning to care for ourselves when the first arrows of life strike. But as we commit to this simple practice, as we sit patiently with our buffalo, we will inevitably come face to face with the sheer, untamed force of its restlessness. We will begin to see, with startling and sometimes uncomfortable clarity, the wild nature of our own thoughts. This direct encounter with the constant chatter of what is often called the monkey mind is the next crucial territory we must explore on our journey inward. After spending some time with the simple practice of watching the breath, you will have inevitably made a profound discovery. You sit down with the sincere intention to find a small patch of silence, a moment of inner quiet, but what you discover instead is a roaring, chaotic, and untamed wilderness. The mind, it turns out, does not want to be still. It does not want to rest on the breath for more than a few seconds. It wants to jump, to chatter, to worry, to plan, to remember, to fantasize. It wants to do anything but be present. The ancient masters of meditation had a wonderfully vivid and accurate name for this phenomenon. They called it the monkey mind. The image they used was not just of a single monkey, but of a monkey that is drunk on fermented fruit, and then, while drunk, is stung by a scorpion. Imagine the frantic, senseless, and painful leaping of such a creature. This is the state of our untrained minds. It is a mind that flings itself from one thought branch to another without rhyme or reason, propelled by the intoxicating buzz of habit and the painful sting of unresolved emotions. To sit for meditation is to come face to face with this drunken, wounded monkey. And it is, at first, a deeply unsettling encounter. We begin to see the monkey's patterns with startling clarity. We notice it is a compulsive storyteller, providing a constant, running commentary on our entire lives. As you sit in silence, it whispers, "You're not doing this right. Your back hurts. This is boring. How much longer do we have to do this? You should be doing something more productive. It is a relentless time traveler. It drags you back into the past, forcing you to relive that embarrassing moment from high school, or to feel the fresh sting of an argument from last week. Then, in the very next moment, it catapults you into the future, creating detailed, anxious scenarios about a meeting you have next week, or spinning fantasies of a vacation you may never take. This monkey mind is a master filmmaker, directing elaborate movies inside your head, complete with full scripts and emotional soundtracks. It stages imaginary arguments where you finally say all the clever things you wish you had said. It rehearses triumphant speeches and crushing failures. It spends hours, days, years of our lives living in worlds that do not exist. And in doing so, it robs us of the only life we actually have. This one, right here, right now. More than anything, this constant mental activity is utterly exhausting. It is the primary source of the stress and fatigue we feel at the end of the day. It is not our jobs or our responsibilities that wear us down so much as the ceaseless internal labor of this restless mind, a mind that never, ever clocks out. Our first instinct, upon discovering this chaotic inner world, is to fight it. We treat the monkey mind as an enemy. We try to suppress it, to force it into silence. When a thought appears, we push it away. We wrestle with it. We command it to stop. Be quiet, we tell our own minds. But this is a battle we can never win. Trying to stop your thoughts with force is like trying to flatten the ripples on the surface of a pond by slapping them with your hand. The more you slap, the more turbulent the water becomes. The more you fight your thoughts, the more agitated and powerful they seem to grow. When you tell yourself, I must not think about that stressful project at work, that project becomes the only thing you can think about. The mind rebels against its own suppression. This struggle creates a painful, secondary layer of suffering. Not only do we have the initial restlessness of the monkey mind, but now we add a layer of frustration and self-criticism on top of it. We begin to think, I'm a failure at this. I'm no good at meditation. My mind is too crazy. Other people can find peace, but I can't. We have taken the first arrow of a restless mind and shot ourselves with the second arrow of self-judgment. We have declared war on ourselves, a war that only creates more inner turmoil. There is a wiser way. It is the way of the compassionate observer, and it is beautifully illustrated in a simple story. A man had a beautiful garden, a place of peace and quiet he had cultivated for years. But one day, his garden was invaded by a large troop of mischievous monkeys. They swung from his trees, they stole his fruit, they knocked over his carefully placed stones. The man's first reaction was rage. He ran into the garden, shouting and waving a stick, trying to chase the monkeys away. But the monkeys thought this was a wonderful game. The more he chased them, the more excited and destructive they became. He would chase a monkey from one tree, and two more would appear in another. He spent the entire day running, shouting, and growing more and more exhausted and furious, while his garden fell into ruin. Finally, defeated, the man gave up. He retreated to the porch of his house, sat down in his chair, and simply watched. He did not approve of the monkey's behavior, but he no longer fought it. He just observed their antics with a kind of detached curiosity. He watched one monkey tease another. He watched one try and fail to open a coconut. He watched them chase each other in circles. And a strange thing happened. The monkeys, no longer being chased, no longer the center of an exciting and dramatic conflict, began to grow bored. There was no more fun to be had. One by one, they lost interest, and by dusk, the entire troop had wandered out of the garden, leaving behind a deep, profound stillness. The peace the man had been fighting for was not something he needed to create. It was something he simply needed to allow by ceasing his struggle. Our mind is the garden. The thoughts are the monkeys. Our practice is to become the man on the porch. We must stop chasing, stop fighting, stop struggling. Instead, we learn to sit back and observe. This is the heart of Buddhist psychology. Befriending, not battling. We can turn this story into a practical technique. It is the simple art of noting, or mental labeling. As you sit with your breath, and a thought inevitably arises, instead of either getting lost in its story or fighting to push it away, you simply, gently, place a label on it. If you find yourself thinking about your to-do list, you silently note in your mind, planning, planning. If a memory of a past hurt appears, you note, remembering, remembering. If a voice of self-criticism starts talking, you note, judging, judging. The label is not a detailed analysis. It is a soft, one-word acknowledgement. Its purpose is to transform the thought from something that is you to something that you are observing. It turns the thought from a subjective reality that has hijacked your awareness into an objective mental event passing through it. You see it for what it is, just a thought, impersonal, impermanent, like a cloud passing through the vast sky of your mind. And after you have noted the thought, what do? With the same gentleness as a mother placing her child back in its crib, you guide your attention back to your anchor, back to the feeling of the breath, back home. This act of seeing a thought arise, noting its presence, and returning to the breath without getting swept away is an act of profound power. It is an exercise in freedom. But to do it effectively, to be able to watch the monkey without chasing it, requires a very specific and fundamental skill. It is the ability to hold our own thoughts, our own experiences, and our own attachments lightly. It is the deep, liberating, and essential art of letting go. We have sat on the porch of our own minds, watching the frantic antics of the drunken monkey. We have learned to see its patterns, to note its comings and goings without getting swept up in the drama. But this observation, this compassionate witnessing, is only possible through the cultivation of a parallel skill, one that is perhaps the most crucial and misunderstood on the entire spiritual path. It is the gentle, powerful, and liberating art of letting go. In our modern culture, which worships grit, tenacity, and holding on at all costs, the phrase, letting go, can sound like an admission of defeat. It can feel like weakness, like apathy, like giving up. But in the language of inner freedom, letting go is the ultimate act of strength. It is not about passively resigning ourselves to fate. It is about actively refusing to carry burdens that we were never meant to bear. It is the wise and courageous decision to stop clutching a burning coal in your hand, simply because you have been told that holding on is a virtue. Letting go is not about losing something. It is about gaining your own life back. So what are these burning coals that we clutch so tightly, wondering why our hands and hearts are so scarred? The first is the past. Our minds are like museums, filled with carefully preserved artifacts of old hurts, resentments, and regrets. We walk through these halls day after day, polishing our grievances, rereading the transcripts of old arguments, and feeling the fresh sting of betrayals that happened years ago. We believe that by holding on to our anger, we are somehow punishing the person who wronged us. But as the saying goes, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. The only one being poisoned is ourselves. To let go of the past does not mean to condone harmful behavior. It does not mean to forget what happened. It simply means we refuse to allow the events of yesterday to continue to inflict pain upon us today. It is a declaration of independence from the tyranny of our own memories. The second burning coal is the future. We cling desperately to our plans, our expectations, our detailed blueprints for how life is supposed to unfold. We create a picture in our minds of the perfect job, the perfect relationship, the perfect life, and then we suffer immensely when the messy, unpredictable reality of life fails to conform to our rigid fantasy. This clinging to future outcomes is the very essence of anxiety. It is the futile attempt to control the uncontrollable. Letting go of the future does not mean we stop planning or having goals. It means we hold those plans lightly. We do our best. We act with integrity and wisdom in the present moment. And we learn to trust in our own resilience to handle whatever comes next, rather than trying to dictate the entire script of a play that has not yet been performed. We also cling to our identities, to the rigid stories we tell ourselves about who we are. I am a successful person. I am an anxious person. I am not creative. We clutch these labels as if they are solid and real, but they are nothing more than mental constructs. They become prisons that prevent us from growing and changing. To be a successful person means you live in constant fear of failure. To be an anxious person becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Letting go of these fixed identities is terrifying because it feels like we are losing ourselves. But what we are really losing is a cage, and what we gain is the freedom to be a dynamic, evolving process, a human being rather than a human label. We let go of who we think we are in order to discover who we might become. There is a timeless Zen story that illustrates this art with perfect clarity. Two monks, a senior master and a young junior, were on a long pilgrimage. They had taken strict vows, one of which was to never make physical contact with a woman. After walking for many hours, they came to a wide river with a dangerously strong current. On the riverbank stood a young woman, beautifully dressed, who was clearly distressed and afraid to cross on her own. The junior monk, righteous in his observance of the rules, walked straight past her, averting his eyes. The senior monk, however, stopped. He looked at the woman, saw her fear, and without a word, he lifted her onto his shoulders. He waded carefully through the powerful current, carrying her to the other side. He gently set her down, bowed, and then continued his journey. The junior monk was speechless with horror. He fell in step behind his master, his mind a raging storm of judgment. For the next 2 hours, they walked in a heavy, angry silence. The junior monk was replaying the scene over and over, his mind filled with criticisms. He broke his vow. How could he do such a thing? What a terrible example for a master to set. Finally, unable to contain his outrage any longer, he burst out, "Master, why did you do that back there? We are forbidden to touch women, yet you carried her across the river." The old monk turned to his young student, his eyes full of a gentle, compassionate wisdom. He smiled softly and said, "Brother, I left that woman on the riverbank 2 hours ago. Are you still carrying her?" This story reveals the very heart of suffering and freedom. The physical act of carrying the woman was fleeting, an act of compassion that was over in minutes. That was the first arrow. The true burden, the second arrow, was the mental act of carrying the judgment, the anger, and the story for hours afterward. The junior monk, by clinging to his rigid ideas, was the one who was truly weighed down. Letting go is the practice of leaving things on the riverbank. It is the practice of not carrying the event, the conversation, the insult, the worry, with you any further than is necessary. It is learning to put down your burdens, How then do we practice this in a tangible way? We can use the very breath that has become our anchor. The breath is a cycle of receiving and releasing. We can infuse this cycle with intention. As you breathe in, you can acknowledge what is present. Breathing in, I feel this tension in my shoulders. Breathing in, I feel this wave of sadness. You are not fighting it. You are simply acknowledging its presence with courage and honesty. Then, as you breathe out, you can make that exhale the very embodiment of release. Breathing out, I soften the tension. Breathing out, I let this wave of sadness flow through me and pass. The out-breath becomes a small, repeatable act of surrender. With each exhalation, you are practicing putting down the woman at the river. You are practicing releasing your grip on the hot coal. Imagine your mind as a hand. For most of our lives, we walk around with this hand clenched into a tight fist, grasping onto our fears, our regrets, our identities, our plans. A clenched fist is a posture of tension, of struggle. A clenched fist cannot receive anything new. It cannot feel the warmth of the sun or the gentle breeze. Letting go is the simple, courageous act of unclenching that fist. It is the willingness to open your hand. We are often afraid that if we open our hand, we will lose everything we are holding. But what we discover is the opposite. We discover that what we were clinging to was the source of our pain. By opening our hand, we lose our burdens and gain our freedom. We create the space for peace to arise. But to truly trust this process, to feel safe enough to unclench our fist, we must understand the nature of what we are holding. We cling so tightly because we believe these thoughts, feelings, and situations are solid, permanent, and real. To master the art of letting go, we must first look deeply into the profound truth that nothing is. We must turn our attention to the great, ever-flowing river of impermanence itself. We have explored the art of letting go, the courageous act of unclenching the fist of the mind and releasing the burning coals of the past and future. But a question naturally arises. Why is our grip so tight in the first place? Why is letting go so difficult? The answer lies in a deep, unspoken assumption that governs our entire experience of life. It is the assumption of permanence. We live as though things are solid, stable, and meant to last. We build our homes, our careers, our relationships, and our very identities on a foundation we believe to be solid rock, when in reality, we are building on the surface of a flowing river. The Buddhist tradition has a name for this fundamental truth of reality, this universal law of flux. The name is anicca, or impermanence. To understand anicca is not to learn a depressing philosophy that everything fades away. It is to discover the most liberating truth of all, a truth that, once seen clearly, allows our clenched fist to open naturally, without force or struggle. It is the master key that unlocks the prison of our own clinging. You do not need to read a sacred text to verify the truth of anicca. You need only look at your own direct experience. Consider your own body. Is it the same body you had 7 years ago? Or even 7 minutes ago? Every moment, millions of your cells are dying, and millions more are being born. The air you just exhaled is different from the air you are now inhaling. Your body is not a static object, like a statue carved from stone. It is a dynamic process, a verb, not a noun. It is a flowing river of change. To see this is to begin to hold your physical life with a little more gentleness and a lot less fear. Now, consider your mind. Your thoughts and feelings are the most perfect and immediate examples of impermanence. A wave of happiness arises, perhaps from a fond memory or a moment of beauty. It shines brightly in your mind, and for a moment, it feels like it will last forever. But it doesn't. It subsides, replaced by a neutral feeling, or perhaps a flicker of worry. Then, a surge of irritation might appear, sparked by a noise or a frustrating thought. It feels solid and all-consuming, but it too passes. Our inner world is like the weather, a ceaseless parade of passing clouds, sunny spells, and sudden storms. To resist this flow is the definition of futility. It is like trying to command the clouds, to stand still in the sky, to accept this flow, to allow our feelings to arise, exist, and pass away without clinging to the pleasant ones or warring with the unpleasant ones, is the beginning of profound inner peace. The world around us sings a constant song of anicca. The seasons turn, a leaf unfurls, and then withers. A mighty tree grows from a tiny seed and will one day fall and become soil for new life. Even the mountains, our very symbols of permanence, are being imperceptibly worn down by wind and rain. All that is composite will one day decompose. All that is brought together will one day fall apart. This is not a tragedy. It is simply the nature of reality. The source of our suffering is not the fact of change itself, but our desperate, heartbreaking resistance to it. We want the people we love to stay the same. We want the happy moments to last forever. We want life to be a fixed photograph, when in fact, it is a relentless, moving river. There is no story that captures the healing power of this realization more beautifully than that of a woman named Kisa Gautami. She was a young mother whose entire world had been built around her infant son. He was her everything. And then one day, he fell ill and died. Kisa Gautami was shattered, but more than that, she was in a state of absolute denial. She could not accept the reality of what had happened. She picked up the small, lifeless body of her child and began to wander through her village, going from door to door, begging everyone she met for a medicine that could bring him back. Some of the villagers mocked her madness. Others looked away in pity, but no one could help her. Her personal grief had become a wall, cutting her off from the world and from reality itself. Finally, a wise man saw her desperate state and, taking pity on her, suggested she go and see the Buddha. Carrying her son, she went to the Buddha and pleaded, "Master, can you give me a medicine that will cure my boy?" The Buddha looked at her with immense compassion, and instead of telling her the hard truth that her son was gone, he said, "Yes, I can make such a medicine, but to do so, I require a special ingredient. I need you to bring me a single mustard seed from a house in this village, where no child, no spouse, no parent, no servantess ever died." Kisa Gautami's heart soared with hope. A single mustard seed. It seemed such a simple task. She began her journey, going from house to house. At the first door, she asked, "The Buddha has sent me to fetch a mustard seed for a medicine. Can you spare one?" "Of course," the woman of the house said, and went to get some. As she was handing them over, Kisa Gautami asked her crucial question. "In this house, has anyone ever died?" The woman's face fell. "Oh, my lady," she said, "the living are few, but the dead are many. We lost our beloved grandfather just last year." With a heavy heart, Kisa Gautami went to the next house, and the next, and the next. The story was always the same. Every family generously offered her seeds, but every family had a story of loss. One had lost a husband, another, a young daughter, another, an uncle. House after house, The answer was the same. Death had visited every single home. As she walked, something profound began to shift within her. Her frantic, sharp, personal grief began to soften and dissolve into a wider, more compassionate understanding. She realized that loss was not a punishment that had been inflicted uniquely upon her. It was the shared, universal condition of being alive. The terrible, "Why me?" that had been screaming in her heart was replaced by the gentle, connective, "Just like me." Her personal sorrow was merging with the great river of human sorrow. She returned to the Buddha, empty-handed, but with a heart full of a strange, sober peace. "Gautami," the Buddha asked, "did you bring the mustard seed?" "No, Lord," she replied. "I could not find a single house untouched by death." She now understood the universal law of anicca, and with that understanding, she was finally able to grieve for her son, release him, and continue on her own path. The wisdom of Kisa Gautami is the wisdom of impermanence. When we truly understand that everything changes, it transforms our lives. When we are caught in a period of great difficulty, pain, or sadness, the knowledge of anicca becomes a light in the darkness. This too shall pass. This is not a hollow platitude. It is a fundamental law of the universe. No storm lasts forever. This knowledge gives us the courage to endure. Conversely, when we are experiencing moments of great joy, love, and beauty, the knowledge of anicca makes them infinitely more precious. We know the beautiful sunset will fade. We know the joyful gathering will end. We know the people we love will not be with us forever. And so, instead of taking these moments for granted, we become fully present for them. We savor them. We cherish them. We drink them in completely because we know they are fleeting and sacred gifts. Life, then, is not about trying to build a dam to stop the river. That will only lead to immense pressure and an inevitable, catastrophic collapse. The path of wisdom is to learn to build a raft. It is to learn to flow with the currents of life, to navigate its twists and turns with grace, skill, and an open heart. We stop fighting reality, and in doing so, we find peace. This deep seeing into the constant flux of our bodies, our feelings, our relationships, and the world around us naturally leads to the most profound and pivotal question on this journey. If everything is changing, if everything is a flowing process, then what about the I who is watching all of this? What about the self that feels so solid, so continuous, so permanent? Is there a fixed entity at the center of the storm? Or is the observer also part of the ever-changing river? This question takes us to the very heart of Buddhist liberation, to the insight that has the power to unravel all our suffering at its root. We have walked together to the edge of a great river, the river of impermanence, of anicca. We have seen how everything we once thought was solid is, in fact, in a state of constant, ceaseless flow. Our bodies, our thoughts, our feelings, our relationships, the very world we stand on, all of it is a dynamic, shimmering process of arising and ceasing. To see this is to begin to loosen our grip, to let go of our desperate attempt to hold on to the waves. But this deep seeing inevitably forces us to ask the most radical and personal question of all. What about the one who is seeing? What about the I that seems to be at the center of this whirlwind of change? Is this self, this core of my being, the one solid rock in the entire flowing river, or is the observer also part of the stream? To explore this question is to approach the very heart of the Buddha's teaching, a truth so profound and counterintuitive that it has the power to dismantle our suffering at its very root. This is the teaching of anatta, often translated as non-self, and while it may sound frightening or strange, it is, in reality, the doorway to ultimate freedom. Let us conduct a gentle investigation together. We are looking for this thing we call I, or myself. Where is it? Let us start with the most obvious candidate, the body. Is this body me? We have already seen that the body is a river of change. It was different a decade ago, and it will be different a decade from now. It gets sick, it gets injured, it ages. We can say, my body, just as we can say, my car, which implies that the owner is different from the possession. So, the self cannot be the body. Well then, what about our feelings? Is a feeling me? A moment ago you might have felt peaceful. Now you might feel curious. And in an hour, you might feel tired. If you were your feelings, you would be a different person every few moments. Feelings are like guests in a house. They come, they stay for a while, and then they leave. They are not the owner of the house. So, the self cannot be our feelings. Perhaps the self is our thoughts, our beliefs, our opinions. This feels closer to home. We identify so strongly with our inner narrator, but we have already sat on the porch and watched the monkey mind. We have seen that thoughts arise unbidden, often chaotically, and then they disappear. We can watch our thoughts. If you can observe a thought, you cannot be that thought. The watcher is separate from what is being watched. A thought is a mental event that passes through awareness. It is not the awareness itself. So, we are not our thoughts. What remains? Perhaps the consciousness itself, the simple fact of knowing. But consciousness is also dependent. Seeing consciousness arises when an I and a visible form come together. Hearing consciousness arises when an ear and a sound come together. It is not a single, continuous, monolithic thing. It is a flickering, dependent process, arising and ceasing with every moment of experience. So when we conduct an honest, thorough search, we are forced to a startling conclusion. We cannot find a solid, independent, unchanging self anywhere in our direct experience. The great Buddhist sage Nagasena explained this with a brilliant analogy in a famous conversation with the Greek king Melinda. The king, a man of sharp logic, was pressing Nagasena on this very point. He asked, "Reverend Sir, what is your name?" Nagasena replied that he was known as Nagasena, but that this was merely a name, a convenient designation, for there was no permanent person to be found. The king was incredulous. He pointed to Nagasena's chariot, which was parked nearby. He asked, "Is the chariot the pole on which it is pulled?" "No, Your Majesty," replied the monk. The king continued, "Is it the axle, the wheels, the frame, the ropes, the yoke?" To each question, Nagasena calmly answered, "No, Your Majesty." Then the king pressed, "Is the chariot something else, separate from all of these parts?" Again, Nagasena replied, "No, Your Majesty." The king, triumphant, said, "Then, Venerable Sir, you are speaking a falsehood. There is no chariot." But Nagasena then turned the question back on the king. He asked, "Your Majesty, how did you get here today?" "I came by chariot," the king replied. Nagasena then delivered the central insight. Chariot, Your Majesty, is simply a convenient name, a designation. It is because of the pole, the axle, the wheels, the frame, and all the other parts that we have the term, the name, chariot. There is no essential chariotness to be found. In exactly the same way, Nagasena is just a convenient name we give to the temporary coming together of the body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness. When we look for a separate, permanent self in the midst of these components, It simply cannot be found. The ego hears this teaching, and it panics. It interprets non-self as, "I do not exist," and it fears annihilation. This is a profound misunderstanding. Anatta does not mean that you are not here, reading these words, thinking these thoughts. It means that what you are is not a thing, but a process. You are not a static noun, but a dynamic verb. You are not a statue. You are a river. You are not a separate, isolated entity, but a temporary, flowing pattern of interconnected phenomena. A wave in the ocean is a perfect example. A wave is real. It has a shape, a direction, a unique character. You can see it. You can be carried by it. But can you find an independent wave that is separate from the ocean? Number. The wave is simply the ocean, doing a temporary dance. In the same way, yourself is the universe doing a temporary, unique, and precious dance. You are not separate from life. You are a momentary expression of it. To understand this is to be liberated. To see that there is no fixed, solid self to protect and defend is to be freed from the heaviest burden we carry. Think of all the energy we spend defending our ego. We get insulted, and our self feels attacked. So we spend hours fuming and plotting our verbal revenge. We fail at a task, and our self feels diminished. So we are crushed by shame. We are consumed by worry about how our self appears to others. This fragile, imaginary self is a tyrannical ruler. To see through its illusion is to stage a revolution. When there is no solid self, who is there to be insulted? An insult becomes like a word written on the water it leaves no trace. When there is no solid self, who is there to fail? A failure is simply an outcome, an experience to learn from, not a permanent stain on our core being. We become more resilient, more flexible, more playful. We stop taking ourselves so seriously. The prison cell of the ego, with its walls of I, me, and mine, is discovered to have been unlocked the entire time. We can finally step out into the vast, open field of interconnected reality. Our journey so far has been one of deep deconstruction. We began with the pervasive feeling of unsatisfactoriness, of dukkha. We then saw that this arises from our clinging to things that are, by their very nature, impermanent, or anicca. And now we see that the one who is doing the clinging, this supposedly solid self, is itself an illusion, a process of anatta. We have taken apart the machine of suffering and examined its core components. But a question remains. What is the fuel that runs this machine? If this illusory self insists on clinging to impermanent things, thereby creating its own suffering, what deep-seated energies are driving this futile and painful activity? To understand the engine of this process, we must now turn our gaze toward the three fundamental toxins of the mind, the poisons that fuel the entire cycle of discontent. We must look into the nature of greed, hatred, and delusion. We have now journeyed into the very heart of deconstruction. We have taken the complex machine of our own suffering and disassembled it piece by piece. We started with the general feeling of unsatisfactoriness, the background radiation of anxiety we call dukkha. We then discovered that this arises from our futile attempt to cling to things that are, by their very nature, in a constant state of flux, the universal law of impermanence, or anicca. And finally, we turned our gaze inward and searched for the solid, continuous self that was doing all the clinging, only to find a flowing, interconnected process, an illusion of solidity the Buddha called anatta, or non-self. The machine is now in pieces before us, but one vital question remains. What is the fuel that powers this engine? What deep, primal energies within the human mind compel this phantom self to grasp at fleeting shadows, thus generating its own endless cycle of discontent. The Buddhist tradition identifies three such energies. They are known as the three poisons, or the three unwholesome roots. These are not sins in a moralistic sense, to be punished by an external judge. They are toxic patterns of the mind, deep-seated habits that distort our perception of reality and compel us to think, speak, and act in ways that inevitably lead to suffering for ourselves and for others. Their names are greed, aversion, and delusion. The first poison is greed, or in the Pali language, lobha. This is the principle of pulling towards, of grasping, of craving. When we hear the word greed, we typically think of the desire for money or material possessions, and that is certainly one of its most visible forms. It is the engine of our consumer culture, a system that masterfully creates feelings of lack and inadequacy, then offers a product as the temporary cure. It whispers that the next phone, the next car, the next fashion accessory will finally make us whole, complete, and happy. But we know from our own experience that this is a lie. The satisfaction is fleeting, and soon the craving returns, often stronger than before. This is the mentality of a hungry ghost, with a tiny throat and a vast, empty stomach, forever consuming but never satisfied. But greed is far more subtle than just materialism. It is the craving for pleasant sensory experiences, the next delicious meal, the next captivating movie, the next validating like on a social media post. We become addicts of stimulation, desperately seeking the next hit of dopamine, increasingly unable to sit with simple, unadorned reality. It is also the craving for praise, for a good reputation, for being seen as important. This is the ego's desperate project to solidify itself, to build a fortress of external validation around its own hollowness. The fundamental problem with greed, in all its forms, is that it is based on a profound misunderstanding of anicca. It believes that by acquiring a thing, a person, or a status, it can achieve lasting security and happiness. But because all things are impermanent, this strategy is doomed from the start. It is like trying to build a house out of clouds. The second poison is aversion, or dosa. If greed is the energy of pulling towards, aversion is the energy of pushing away. It is the violent resistance to reality when it does not conform to our desires. Its family of emotions includes anger, hatred, frustration, irritation, judgment, resentment, and fear. It is the surge of rage you feel when another driver cuts you off in traffic. It is the cold knot of resentment you feel towards a colleague who receives the promotion you felt you deserved. It is the low-grade irritation that simmers just below the surface when technology fails or plans go awry. In our modern world, we can see a powerful manifestation of aversion in the outrage culture that dominates online discourse. Social media algorithms have learned that anger is one of the most powerful forms of engagement. They feed us a constant diet of things that will provoke our disagreement and our judgment, and we become addicted to the feeling of righteous indignation. We define ourselves not by what we stand for, but by what we stand against. We are constantly at war with the parts of reality we dislike, pushing them away with all our might. The problem with aversion is that it is a direct and futile battle against the river of life. It is an attempt to stand in the middle of the stream and command the currents to stop. It accomplishes nothing except to exhaust us, embitter our hearts, and poison our own experience of the present moment. In traditional depictions of the wheel of life, the great circle of suffering we call samsara, the engine that drives the entire wheel, is shown in the very central hub. In this hub, we find the images of three animals, each one biting the tail of the one in front of it, locked in a self-perpetuating cycle. The first animal is a rooster, bright red, strutting and proud. The rooster symbolizes greed, always pecking at the ground, always looking for the next tasty morsel, never satisfied. The second animal is a snake, often depicted as dark green or black, its eyes cold and its tongue flicking. The snake symbolizes aversion, ready to strike out with venomous hatred at anything it perceives as a threat. And the third animal is a pig. The pig symbolizes the third and most fundamental poison, delusion or moha. The pig is depicted as dirty, slow, and blissfully unaware, content to roll in its own filth. It represents our fundamental ignorance of the true nature of reality. It is from this root ignorance that the other two poisons are born. The snake and the rooster emerge from the mouth of the pig. It is because we are deluded, because we do not see the truth of anicca and anatta, that we develop greed and aversion. Because we are ignorant of the fact that things are impermanent, we develop a foolish greed for them, believing they will bring lasting happiness. And because we are ignorant of the fact that there is no solid, separate self to protect, we develop a fierce aversion to anything that threatens our comfort or our ego. Greed and aversion, in turn, cloud our minds even further, deepening our delusion. The snake and the rooster bite the pig's tail, ensuring the cycle continues, spinning the wheel of our discontent endlessly. This powerful image shows us that while we must learn to manage our moments of greed and aversion, the ultimate task is to cut the very root of the problem, the pig of delusion. The ultimate antidote to poison is not another, more pleasant poison. It is wisdom. It is the clear seeing, the prajna, that dispels the darkness of ignorance. To recognize these three poisons at work in our own daily lives is the critical first step. It is to look into the garden of our mind and finally see the weeds for what they are. We see the grasping weed of greed, trying to choke out all the other plants. We see the thorny weed of aversion, making the garden a painful and hostile place. And we see that they are both growing from the deep, stubborn root of delusion. But simply identifying the weeds is not enough. A garden does not become beautiful merely by recognizing what is wrong with it. We must undertake the patient, dedicated work of horticulture. We must gently, but firmly, remove the weeds. And just as importantly, we must actively cultivate the flowers of wisdom, compassion, and generosity in their place. This active, intentional process of tending to our inner world, of purifying the mind and cultivating wholesome qualities, has a name. It is called bhavana, or mental cultivation. It is the art and science of turning the poisoned soil of our mind into a flourishing garden. We have journeyed deep into the territory of the mind and have come face to face with the three fundamental poisons that fuel our discontent: the grasping of greed, the pushing of aversion, and the deep, underlying blindness of delusion. To see them at work within us is a moment of profound awakening. It is like turning on a light in a room we have occupied our entire lives, only to see for the first time that it is filled with toxic dust and tangled weeds. The question that hangs in the air is, what now? Is it enough to simply know that these poisons exist, to catalogue them and resign ourselves to their presence? The wisdom of the Buddha offers a resounding no. To merely diagnose the illness is not the end of the path. It is the very beginning. The path itself is one of active, hopeful, and creative transformation. This process is known as bhavana. The word itself is beautiful, translating not simply as meditation, but more accurately as to cultivate or to cause to become. This very name reframes the entire spiritual endeavor. It is not a passive waiting for enlightenment to strike like lightning. It is the conscious, intentional, and patient work of a gardener who has decided to take responsibility for their own inner landscape. In the West, the word meditation is often misunderstood. We tend to associate it with an attempt to empty the mind, to achieve a state of blankness, to stop our thoughts, or to somehow transcend the messy reality of our lives. But this is a misconception. Bhavana is not an escape from the world. It is a training for the world. It is the mental and emotional equivalent of going to a gym. You do not lift weights to become good at lifting weights in the gym. You do it to build the strength, resilience, and fitness to navigate the physical demands of your daily life with greater ease and capability. In the same way, we practice bhavana not to become professional meditators, but to cultivate the inner strength, clarity, and compassion needed to engage with our families, our work, and our world with less reactivity and more wisdom. It is the skill of building an inner refuge so that we are no longer helplessly tossed about by the external storms of life. The most powerful way to understand bhavana is through the analogy of a garden. Your mind is like a plot of fertile ground. If you leave it untended, things will still grow. But what will grow? The wild, invasive, and hardy plants will take over. The weeds of anxious thoughts, the thorny bushes of criticism and judgment, the tangled vines of old resentments. These unwholesome states grow effortlessly because, like weeds, they require no special cultivation. This is the natural state of the untrained mind. The practice of bhavana is the decision to become the gardener of this inner plot. The first act of a wise gardener is not to curse the weeds, but to understand their nature and the nature of the soil. The work then begins. It involves gently but firmly pulling the weeds of unwholesome thoughts, not with aggression, but with mindful awareness, refusing to water them with our attention. It involves preparing the soil, making it soft and receptive. And most importantly, it involves planting new seeds. These are the seeds of wholesome states, the seed of clarity, the seed of patience, the seed of generosity, the seed of joy, and the seed of compassion. And like any gardener, we know that the work does not end with planting. We must provide the right conditions, day after day. We must water the seeds with our consistent effort and energy. We must ensure they get the sunlight of wisdom. We must patiently nurture their growth. Within this framework of cultivation, the Buddhist tradition outlines two primary modes of practice, two skills that work together like the two wings of a bird. Both are necessary to fly. The first wing is called samatha, which means tranquility or calm. The primary goal of samatha practice is to develop a stable and concentrated mind. It is the art of calming the drunken, wounded monkey. A classic analogy for samatha is a jar filled with muddy water. If the jar is constantly shaken, the water remains opaque and you cannot see through it. This is the mind agitated by the 5 hindrances of sensual desire, ill will, restlessness, sloth, and doubt. The practice of samatha is like setting the jar down and allowing it to be still. The mud, the hindrances, slowly and naturally settles to the bottom, leaving the water of the mind clear, bright, and workable. Our practice of anapanasati, of resting our attention on the breath, is a foundational samatha practice. By continually returning our awareness to a single, neutral anchor point, we are taming the wild buffalo. We are letting the muddy water settle. The mind becomes less distractible, more peaceful, and more powerful. The second wing of the bird is vipassana, which means insight or clear seeing. Once the water in the jar has become clear through the practice of samatha, you can now look through it and see what lies at the bottom. With a mind that is calm and stable, You can now turn your attention to the nature of your own experience and see reality as it truly is. This is the investigative aspect of meditation. You use your calm, focused mind like a microscope to look deeply into your own body and mind. And what do you see? You begin to see for yourself, not as a theory, but as a lived reality. The truth of anicca, watching thoughts and sensations arise and pass away in an endless flow. You see dukkha, the subtle unsatisfactoriness woven into all conditioned experience. And you see anatta, looking for a solid self and finding only an impersonal, interconnected process. Vipassana is the practice that uproots the pig of delusion. It cuts through ignorance with the sword of direct, experiential wisdom. Samatha and Vipassana are not truly separate. They are intertwined. A calm mind sees more clearly, and clear insight brings about a deeper, more unshakable calm. One wing strengthens the other, allowing the bird of our practice to soar. As we embark on this path of cultivation, we must remember the gardener's most important virtue: patience. We live in a culture that demands instant results. We want a quick fix for our anxiety, a magic pill for our discontent. Bhavana is the antidote to this mindset. You cannot plant an acorn in the morning and expect to sit under the shade of a mighty oak tree in the afternoon. You cannot pull on a young sprout to make it grow faster. You will only kill it. The gardener's job is simply to provide the right conditions: good soil, the right amount of water, and adequate sunlight. The growth itself is a natural, organic process that has its own timeline. Our practice is the same. We show up each day, we sit, we provide the conditions of stillness and mindful attention. We trust the process. Some days the garden will seem full of weeds. Other days we will see a new flower blooming. We treat both with the same steady, patient equanimity. Now, as we stand in our garden, ready with our tools, ready to cultivate, a question arises. Of all the beautiful flowers we could choose to plant, which one is the most essential? In a world that is often so harsh, and in our own minds that are so often filled with self-criticism and judgment, perhaps the most healing and revolutionary act is to cultivate the flower of unconditional friendliness. We must first plant the seed of a warm and open heart. We will begin then by cultivating the beautiful, fragrant flower of metta, or loving kindness. We now stand as gardeners in the fertile ground of our own minds. We have acknowledged the soil, we understand the nature of the weeds, and we have committed to the patient work of cultivation, of bhavana. The first and most essential flower we will choose to plant is one with the power to transform the entire landscape of the heart. It is the direct and powerful antidote to the cold, sharp poison of aversion, where aversion, judgment, and hatred create walls of separation. This flower dissolves them with a gentle, persistent warmth. It is the practice of metta, a word from the Pali language that translates as loving kindness, unconditional friendliness, or boundless goodwill. Metta is not the sentimental, grasping, and conditional love of romance or attachment. It is a steady, radiant, and unconditional wish for the well-being of all living things. Starting with the one person we so often exclude from our circle of care, ourselves. It is the medicine that softens a heart made hard by fear, heals a spirit wounded by criticism, and reminds us of our fundamental connection to all of life. The practice of metta begins with the most radical and often the most difficult step, offering this loving kindness to yourself. In our cultures, which often praise self-criticism as a driver of achievement, this act can feel awkward, selfish, or even narcissistic. The inner critic, that harsh voice of the monkey mind, may immediately object, listing all the reasons why we are unworthy of our own kindness. But the wisdom of this path is clear. You cannot pour water from an empty vessel. You cannot genuinely wish for others to be well if you are fundamentally at war with yourself. A heart filled with self-loathing is a barren, acidic soil in which no flower of true generosity can grow. So, the cultivation of metta is a revolution that begins at home, in the quiet territory of your own heart. The practice is simple and gentle. You find a comfortable posture, just as you would for watching the breath. You close your eyes, and for a moment, try to connect with a feeling of warmth. You might imagine the feeling of warm sunlight on your skin, or recall the unconditional love you feel for a pet. And into that space of gentle warmth, you begin to silently offer yourself a few traditional phrases. You can use these or find words that resonate more deeply with you. The intention is what matters. Slowly, gently, you repeat in your mind, "May I be safe. May I be free from inner and outer harm. May I be happy. May I feel the joy of a peaceful heart. May I be healthy. May my body be strong, and my mind be clear. May I live with ease. May I meet the challenges of life with grace and resilience." You repeat these phrases not as affirmations you are trying to force yourself to believe, but as heartfelt wishes, as gentle seeds being planted in the soil of your mind. Some days, the phrases may feel hollow, and the feelings may not come. That is perfectly all right. The gardener's job is not to force the flower to bloom, but simply to plant the seed and water it with their intention. You are just making the offering. This simple act of offering yourself unconditional goodwill is one of the most healing things you can ever do. It is the beginning of the end of your inner war. Once you have spent some time tending to the soil of your own heart, the practice then expands the circle of kindness outwards in a psychologically brilliant sequence. First, you bring to mind a benefactor or a dear friend. This should be someone for whom it is very easy to feel warmth and appreciation. A teacher who was kind to you, a friend who has always supported you, a beloved family member. Picture them in your mind's eye, see them smiling, and then offer them the same phrases. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. End quote. May you tonnen. End quote. Love. Feel the natural warmth that flows from your heart as you make this offering. Let it be simple and effortless. Next, you expand the circle to include a neutral person. This is someone you see regularly, but for whom you have no strong feelings, positive or negative. It could be the cashier at your local store, a person you see on your daily commute, the mail carrier. By bringing this person to mind and offering them the same sincere wishes, you are challenging the mind's habit of indifference. You are recognizing their humanity, their own quiet wish to be safe and happy, just like you. This step begins to break down the artificial walls between my people and everyone else. Then, when you feel stable in the practice, you can undertake the more advanced stage, offering metta to a difficult person. This is someone with whom you have conflict or tension. It is crucial to understand that the purpose here is not to condone their harmful actions or to force yourself into a sentimental friendship. The purpose is to liberate your own heart from the poison of resentment. You are doing this for your own sake, to free yourself from the burden of carrying that hot coal of anger. You can hold their image in your mind and simply wish, may you be free from the suffering that causes you to act in harmful ways. To the best of my ability, I wish you peace. This is a profound act of self-love. freeing yourself from the chains of your own hatred. Finally, you let the circle become boundless. You radiate metta in all directions, to all beings without exception, to the people in your town, in your country, across the world, to friends and strangers, to those you like and those you dislike, to all animals, to all beings in all realms, seen and unseen. May all beings be safe. May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings live with ease. You become a beacon of goodwill, radiating warmth from your heart to the entire universe. The transformative power of metta is not merely a poetic idea. It is a force that can disarm hostility and pacify rage. The stories tell of an incident when the Buddha's jealous cousin, Devadatta, conspired to have him killed. He arranged for the keepers of the royal elephants to get the fiercest elephant, Nalagiri, drunk on intoxicants, and then release it on the narrow road where the Buddha was walking. The enraged elephant charged down the road, trumpeting in fury, a terrifying engine of destruction. The townspeople screamed and ran for their lives. The Buddha's loyal attendant, Ananda, in a panic, tried to shield him with his own body, but the Buddha told him to step aside and stood calmly, facing the charging beast. He did not prepare to fight or to defend himself. Instead, he did the one thing that was the opposite of violence. He opened his heart and radiated a powerful, focused, and unconditional wave of loving kindness toward the suffering animal. He saw not a monster, but a creature confused, poisoned, and in pain. As the force of the Buddha's metta reached the elephant, a miracle occurred. The beast's drunken rage began to subside. Its steps slowed, its trumpeting quieted. The fire in its eyes was cooled by the balm of kindness. It reached the Buddha, no longer a killer, but a humbled creature, and knelt before the one who had met its rage, not with equal force, but with fearless love. Metta is not a weak or sentimental feeling. It is a shield and a source of profound strength. By practicing metta, we are literally rewiring the neural pathways in our brain. We are strengthening the circuits of empathy, connection, and positive emotion, while weakening the circuits of judgment, fear, and hostility. It creates a virtuous cycle. A heart softened by metta naturally leads to kinder speech and more generous actions. When we are kinder to others, they tend to respond to us with more kindness, which in turn nourishes and reinforces the warmth in our own hearts. As this flower of loving kindness begins to bloom in the garden of our mind, its fragrance naturally attracts its sibling. The sincere wish for all beings to be happy, when it encounters the reality of their pain, naturally transforms into a new, powerful feeling. It becomes the deep, heartfelt wish for all beings to be free from their suffering. This next beautiful flower, to be cultivated in our garden, born directly from the rich soil of metta, is the flower of karuna, or compassion. In the fertile soil of our hearts, we have planted the first beautiful flower, metta, or loving kindness. We have patiently watered it with our intention, and its fragrance has begun to soften the hard ground of our own self-judgment and our indifference to others. It is the sincere and boundless wish for all beings to be happy, to have the causes of happiness. But what happens when this open, loving heart turns its gaze upon the world and sees not happiness, but pain? What is the heart's natural response when it encounters the undeniable reality of suffering, Jin, a friend's grief, a stranger's hardship, or the overwhelming tragedies we see in the news? The response, born directly from the womb of metta, is the second great flower in the garden of the mind. It is karuna, or compassion. If metta is the sun's warmth, karuna is the gentle rain that falls on a parched land. It is the trembling or quivering of the heart in the face of suffering. It is not merely feeling sad for someone. It is the active, energetic wish for them to be free from their suffering and the causes of their suffering. It is vital to distinguish true compassion, karuna, from its more common and distant cousin, pity. Pity looks down from a position of safety and separation. It says, "Oh, you poor thing, I am so glad I am not in your unfortunate situation." Pity reinforces the ego. It creates a wall between the observer and the one who suffers. It is a subtle form of aversion, a way of pushing the other person's pain away by turning them into an object, a sad story that is separate from us. Karuna, on the other hand, does the opposite. It dissolves the walls. It is born from a deep recognition of our shared humanity. Its feeling is not, "Poor you," but rather, "This suffering is our shared experience." It recognizes that the conditions that led to your pain could just as easily lead to mine. It is the courage to move towards suffering, not away from it. It is the willingness to feel with another, to share a small piece of their burden, not by taking it on, but by simply being present with them in the midst of it. Pity says, "I am here, and you are there." Compassion says, "We are here together." In a world connected by a ceaseless flow of information, we are exposed to more suffering than any generation in human history. We see famines, wars, injustices, and personal tragedies from every corner of the globe, delivered to the small screen in our hand every single day. The natural response of a sensitive heart is to feel overwhelmed. How can we possibly hold so much pain? This is the danger of what is called compassion, fatigue, or empathic distress. If our compassion is simply a raw, untrained empathy, we will drown. If we simply absorb all the pain of the world like a sponge, we will become so waterlogged with sorrow that we are paralyzed, unable to help anyone, including ourselves. This burnout is not true karuna, wise compassion, the compassion that can act effectively in the world without destroying itself, must be balanced and supported by other qualities of the awakened mind. It needs the wing of wisdom, or prajna. Wisdom understands the bigger picture. It sees the impersonal and impermanent nature of all things, including suffering. It knows that we cannot single-handedly save the world, and it releases us from the arrogant and exhausting burden of a savior complex. It allows us to help where we can, with humility and grace. Compassion also needs the stability of a calm and collected mind, the quality of samadhi we cultivate through our breathing practice. A stable mind can be present with intense emotion without being immediately hijacked by it. It can witness pain without panicking, which allows it to respond with clarity instead of mere reactivity. The ideal of this wise, active, and boundless compassion is beautifully embodied in the archetypal figure of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. A Bodhisattva is a being who has made a profound vow to postpone their own final enlightenment until every last being in the universe has been liberated from suffering. The story tells that Avalokiteshvara looked out from a state of deep meditation and saw the countless beings of all the realms caught in the webs of their own pain. He saw their fear, their greed, their loneliness, their anger. He felt their suffering as his own, and the sheer, immeasurable scale of it was so overwhelming that his heart broke. The despair was so immense that his head shattered into 11 pieces. This is a perfect metaphor for compassion fatigue, for the feeling of being utterly broken by the pain of the world. But the story does not end there. The Buddha of boundless light, Amitabha, saw his plight and, with his own great compassion, reassembled the shattered pieces. He gave Avalokiteshvara not one head, but 11, so that he could perceive the cries of the suffering from all directions. And he gave him not 2 arms, but 1,000, so that he could reach out and offer aid in countless skillful ways. And crucially, in the palm of each of the 1,000 hands, there was an eye of wisdom. This powerful imagery teaches us everything we need to know about true karuna. The 1,000 arms represent active, engaged compassion. It is not a passive feeling of sadness, but a readiness to help, to serve, to alleviate suffering through concrete action. But the 1,000 eyes represent the wisdom that must guide every compassionate act. True compassion is not blind. It is not a sentimental and foolish attempt to give everyone everything they want. It is skillful. It knows that sometimes the most compassionate act is to say no. Sometimes it is to be firm. Sometimes it is to challenge someone. And very often, it is to simply be silent and listen. The eyes of wisdom see the deeper causes of suffering and know that the most compassionate act of all is to help others find the tools to liberate themselves. We do not need 1,000 arms to practice compassion in our daily lives. The practice of karuna begins in small, simple, and profound ways. Perhaps the most fundamental act of compassion is the practice of deep listening. When a friend or loved one is in pain, our first instinct is often to rush in with advice, to try to fix their problem, or to share a story of our own. But true, compassionate listening is the rare and precious gift of offering your silent, non-judgmental presence. It is the gift of letting someone know that they are not alone in their pain, that they are being heard without any agenda. Compassion can be a kind word offered to a stranger who looks distressed. It can be the act of forgiving someone for a small mistake, recognizing that they too are imperfect. It begins with the simple intention, when you witness suffering in another, to hold the silent wish in your heart. May you be free from this suffering. May you find peace. As the flower of metta wishes for all to find happiness, the flower of karuna wishes for all to be free from pain. Together, they create a profound sense of connection to the world. But there is a third, more subtle challenge that our hearts face, one that is particularly potent in our competitive and comparison-driven societies. What is our response when we see the happiness, success, and good fortune of others? This brings us to the next beautiful flower we must cultivate in our garden, the radiant antidote to jealousy and envy. This is the practice of mudita, or sympathetic joy. In the garden of our hearts, we have now planted 2 magnificent flowers. The first is metta, loving kindness, the unconditional wish for all beings to find happiness. The second is karuna, compassion, the trembling of the heart that wishes for all beings to be free from suffering. Together, they create a profound sense of connection, weaving our personal fate into the shared tapestry of all life. They open our hearts to both the joys and the sorrows of the world. But as we cultivate this open heart, we will inevitably encounter a third, and perhaps more subtle, challenge. It is a challenge born not from witnessing another's pain, but from witnessing their success, their joy, their good fortune. What is our first, honest, gut-level reaction when we hear that a colleague has received the promotion we wanted? Or when we see photos of a friend's beautiful home or idyllic vacation? What do we feel when someone else's child excels? Or when another person seems to effortlessly possess the beauty, talent, or happiness that we crave for ourselves? If we are truly honest, the first flicker of feeling is often not one of pure joy. It is a tight, uncomfortable knot in the stomach. It is the sour taste of envy, It is the whisper of the monkey mind that says, "Why them and not me? Their success somehow diminishes me. Their happiness makes my own life seem lacking." This is one of the most painful and isolating poisons of the human heart, and it is a poison that our modern culture actively encourages. We live in a world built on a foundation of comparison. Social media platforms are engineered to be highlight reels, presenting us with a non-stop parade of curated triumphs and perfect moments. We are conditioned to see life as a zero-sum game, a relentless competition for a limited supply of happiness, success, and recognition. We secretly believe that there is only so much good fortune to go around, and if someone else gets a large slice of the pie, it must mean there is less left for us. This mentality is the breeding ground for resentment and the thief of all our joy. It traps us in a lonely prison of scarcity, where we can only feel good when we are on top, and where the happiness of others becomes a direct threat to our own fragile ego. The antidote to this painful poison, the third great flower in the garden of the heart, is mudita. The word is often translated as sympathetic or appreciative joy. It is the genuine, unselfish gladness we feel in response to the success, well-being, and happiness of others. Mudita is the direct opposite of envy. While envy comes from a sense of lack, mudita flows from a sense of abundance. It understands the profound truth that happiness is not a limited resource. The joy of another person does not subtract from our own. In fact, the ability to share in their joy has the power to multiply ours infinitely. Mudita is the heart's celebration. It is the ability to feel happy with people, not just for them. It is to see a friend's success and feel a genuine thrill, as if it were your own. It is to witness an act of kindness between strangers and feel your own heart lift in response. Mudita breaks down the walls of the ego and allows us to participate in the vast ocean of joy that exists in the world at every moment. How then do we cultivate this rare and beautiful flower in the thorny soil of our competitive culture? Like all practices of bhavana, we begin gently and build our capacity over time. We start with someone whose happiness is intrinsically linked to our own, someone for whom feeling joy is almost effortless. Bring to mind a person you love dearly, a child, a beloved partner, a cherished friend. Now, recall a time when something wonderful happened to them. Remember the look of pure joy on their face when they achieved a long-held dream, or the sound of their laughter during a moment of simple happiness. As you hold this memory, notice the feeling it evokes in your own heart. It is a warm, expansive feeling, a genuine gladness. This is the seed of mudita. Your only task is to recognize this feeling, to honor it, and to let yourself rest in it. This is your foundation. The next stage is to apply this practice to our daily lives, particularly in those moments when the opposite reaction, envy, is most likely to arise. Let us take the modern-day training ground for this practice, your social media feed. You are scrolling, and you see a post from an acquaintance announcing a new job, a new relationship, a beautiful trip. Notice your first reaction. Does your stomach tighten? Does the inner critic start comparing your life to theirs? Do not judge this reaction. Simply acknowledge it with mindful awareness. Ah, there is the feeling of envy. There is the thought of comparison. You see the monkey mind up to its old tricks. Then, you consciously and intentionally pivot. You make the choice to practice mudita. You can look at the photo and say silently in your heart, "That is wonderful for them. How lovely that they are having that experience. May their happiness continue. May they be safe and well." You are not trying to force a feeling. You are simply planting a different seed. You are shifting your perspective from one of, "What about me?" to one of, How wonderful for you. With practice, this intentional shift begins to change the automatic habit. The gap between the stimulus, their good news, and your response, genuine joy, becomes shorter and shorter. The transformative power of this practice cannot be overstated. When we are trapped in envy, we are fundamentally alone. The world becomes a collection of rivals. But when we can practice mudita, the world becomes a community. The success of others is no longer a threat. It is an inspiration and a source of shared joy. Our own opportunities for happiness expand exponentially. If we can only be happy when good things happen to us, our chances are limited. But if we can genuinely rejoice in the good fortune of our friends, our family, our community, and even strangers, then every day is filled with countless opportunities to experience joy. Someone, somewhere, at this very moment, is falling in love, is holding their newborn child for the first time, is recovering from an illness, is achieving a lifelong goal. Through mudita, their joy can also become ours. We tap into a universal stream of gladness that is always flowing. We have now planted 3 radiant flowers in our garden. Metta, the wish for all beings to find happiness. Karuna, the wish for all beings to be free from suffering. And mudita, the joy in the happiness and freedom of others. These 3 qualities create a warm, connected, and deeply compassionate heart. They are the beautiful expressions of a mind that is beginning to see beyond the narrow prison of the self. However, for this garden to be truly resilient, for it to withstand the inevitable droughts and floods of life, it needs one final element: a heart that is only filled with love, compassion, and joy can become exhausted and unbalanced. It can be swept away by its own powerful emotions. It needs a deep, stabilizing foundation, a quality that allows it to love without clinging, to care without being consumed, and to rejoice without losing its center. This final, crowning quality, which holds all the others in a perfect, wise embrace, is the profound peace of upekkha, or equanimity. We have walked together through the beautiful, blossoming garden of the heart. We have planted the radiant flower of metta, the unconditional wish for all to be happy. We have nurtured the gentle flower of karuna, the heartfelt wish for all to be free from suffering. And we have celebrated the rare flower of mudita, the selfless joy in the good fortune of others. A heart cultivated in this way is a warm, open, and deeply connected heart. It is a beautiful place to live. But this garden, no matter how beautiful, exists in the midst of a world filled with storms, and a heart that is only open and soft, without a deep, stabilizing foundation, is a vulnerable heart. A love that is not balanced by wisdom can easily turn into anxious attachment and clinging. A compassion that is not grounded in stability can lead to overwhelming burnout and despair. A joy that is not held in a spacious awareness can become a form of manic excitement, dependent on the next piece of good news. For these 3 beautiful flowers to truly flourish and offer their gifts to the world, they must be planted in the rich, deep, and unshakable soil of the 4th and final of these divine abodes. This is the crowning quality of upekkha, or equanimity. Just as with the other sublime states, the word equanimity is easily misunderstood. To the modern ear, conditioned to value passionate engagement above all else, equanimity can sound like indifference, apathy, or cold detachment. It can conjure the image of someone who simply doesn't care, a heart that has shut down to protect itself from pain. But this is the absolute opposite of upekkha. Indifference is a state of contraction. It is born from fear and aversion. It is the heart saying, "I will not feel," because feeling is too painful. It is a wall built to keep the world out. Upekkha, true equanimity, is a state of radical openness and expansion. It is not born of fear, but of profound wisdom and trust. It is the heart saying, I am so open and I care so deeply that I will not allow my own personal reactions to cloud my judgment or disturb my peace. I will hold all of life's experiences in a vast, loving, and spacious awareness. Indifference is a shutdown. Equanimity is an unshakable, all-embracing presence. It is the lived, embodied understanding of anicca, the wisdom of impermanence in action. The most powerful image for Upekkha is that of a great, ancient mountain. Picture it in your mind. Its base is rooted deep within the earth, solid and immovable. Its peak rises majestically into the sky, sometimes clear and sharp against a blue expanse, sometimes shrouded in cloud. This mountain has stood for millennia, and it has experienced every kind of weather imaginable. Violent storms have raged against its slopes, with howling winds and lashing rains that would flatten anything less substantial. The scorching sun of summer has beaten down upon its rocks. The heavy snows of winter have blanketed it in a deep, cold silence. Gentle spring breezes have whispered through its trees, and beautiful autumn sunsets have painted its face with color. Through all of this, the mountain remains unchanged in its fundamental nature. It does not fight the storm or complain about the wind. It does not desperately cling to the perfect sunny day, trying to make it last forever. It simply allows the weather to come and to go. The mountain understands that the weather is impersonal. It is just the changing nature of the atmosphere. The mountain's own vastness, stillness, and quiet dignity are never threatened by the fleeting conditions that pass across its surface. To cultivate upekkha is to learn to become this mountain. Our mind is the mountain, and the changing conditions of our lives are the weather. The Buddhist tradition describes this weather as the 8 worldly winds, which are constantly blowing upon us, threatening to knock us off balance. They come in 4 pairs of opposites. The first pair is pleasure and pain. The untrained mind is constantly chasing pleasant feelings and running from painful ones, a frantic and exhausting pursuit. The second pair is gain and loss. We feel elated when we acquire wealth, status, or possessions, and we feel devastated when we lose them. The third pair is praise and blame. We are inflated by the praise and approval of others, and we are crushed by their criticism and blame. And the fourth pair is fame and disrepute. We are intoxicated by having a good reputation and being well known, and we are mortified by shame and public disapproval. An ordinary mind is like a leaf caught in these 8 winds, blown helplessly up and down, back and forth, with no stability or peace. The practice of equanimity is the cultivation of our inner mountain. It is the ability to experience pleasure without grasping for more, and to experience pain without resisting or adding a second arrow. It is the ability to accept praise with gratitude, but without arrogance, and to receive blame with an open heart, examining it for truth without becoming defensive or despondent. It is the freedom that comes from unhooking our well-being from the unpredictable and uncontrollable weather of external circumstances. Upekkha, then, is not a state of not caring. It is a state of caring so deeply and so wisely that you are able to be of true service to the world. It is the quality that perfects and protects the other 3 divine abodes. It allows metta, or loving kindness, to be truly free. A love balanced with equanimity does not say, I love you, therefore you must make me happy and never leave me. It says, I love you, and I can hold your joy and your sorrow, your presence and your absence, in my spacious heart with unwavering goodwill. It allows karuna, or compassion, to be sustainable. A compassion balanced with equanimity can witness great suffering without being shattered by it. It feels the pain of the world, but from a place of great stability, like a skilled doctor who can treat a grievous wound with a steady hand and a clear mind, rather than fainting at the sight of blood. And it allows mudita, or sympathetic joy, to be pure. A joy balanced with equanimity celebrates the success of others without becoming lost in vicarious excitement or creating expectations for their future. It is a calm, steady gladness. Upekkha is the deep, clear lake at the center of the garden, which perfectly reflects the beauty of the flowers, the sky, and the clouds, without being swept away or disturbed by them. It is the vast, quiet, and loving heart. We have now explored the full cultivation of this inner garden, planting and nurturing the 4 great flowers of the awakened heart. We have developed an inner toolkit for meeting the world with warmth, compassion, joy, and unshakable balance. The journey so far has been largely an internal one. The logical next step is to carry this cultivated heart out of the quiet space of formal meditation and into the bustling, complex, and often stressful arena of our daily lives. How do we practice this wisdom when we are faced with deadlines, difficult colleagues, and the pressures of the modern economy? How do we turn our work, which is so often a source of our greatest dukkha, into a field for practice and an expression of our deepest values? This leads us to explore the practical application of this path in the realm of our career and livelihood. We have spent time in the inner garden, cultivating the 4 divine abodes of the heart: loving, kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. We have built for ourselves an inner resource of warmth, resilience, and unshakable balance. But a garden is not grown to be kept behind a wall. Its flowers are meant to be seen, its fragrance meant to be shared. The purpose of this inner cultivation is not to retreat from the world, but to engage with it more fully, more wisely, and more gracefully. And for most of us, the primary arena of this engagement, the place where we spend the majority of our waking hours, and where our inner peace is most rigorously tested, is the world of our work. Our jobs are so often the source of our greatest stress, our dukkha. It is in the workplace that the poisons of greed, aversion, and delusion can run rampant. But it is also here, in this very same place, that we have the greatest opportunity to apply our practice. The Buddhist path offers a profound framework for this, a principle known as samma ajiva, or right livelihood. Traditionally, right livelihood was defined in very clear terms: counseling followers to avoid professions that cause direct harm to living beings. This included trading in weapons, in human beings, in meat, in intoxicants, and in poisons. This ethical foundation is as relevant today as it was 2,500 years ago, reminding us that our work should, at a bare minimum, seek to do no harm. But for most of us living in the complex global economy of the 21st century, the ethical questions are more subtle. Few of us are arms dealers, but we may work for a company whose advertising creates feelings of inadequacy to sell a product. We may work in a financial system that sometimes prioritizes profit over stability. We may work in technology, creating products that are designed to be addictive and to capture human attention for commercial gain. To practice right livelihood today requires a deep and honest inquiry into the impact of our work. But it goes even deeper than that. The true practice of right livelihood is less about your job title and more about the how than the what. It is about the intention, the attitude, and the quality of presence you bring to your work. whatever it may be. You could be a celebrated surgeon whose work is driven by greed and a desire for fame, and this would not be right livelihood. Or you could be a janitor who cleans the hospital floors with meticulous care and a quiet mind, bringing a sense of dignity and peace to the space for sick patients. And that would be the absolute embodiment of right livelihood. The invitation, then, is to see our workplace not as a battlefield of stress and competition, but as a monastery, a dedicated field for our practice. Your desk can be your meditation cushion. Your difficult colleague can be your teacher. Your daily tasks can be your liturgy. How do we do this? We begin by challenging the modern myth of multitasking. We believe that juggling 5 things at once is a sign of efficiency, but it is actually a recipe for anxiety and error. Multitasking is just rapid, frantic switching that exhausts the mind. The practice of mindfulness at work is to do one thing at a time. When you are writing an email, just write the email. Let your attention rest fully on the words, the tone, the intention. When you are finished, you move to the next task. When you are in a meeting, just be in the meeting, instead of planning what you are going to say next. Practice deep listening. Listen to your colleagues with the same quality of compassionate attention you would offer a dear friend. This simple act of presence can transform team dynamics and dissolve misunderstandings. When faced with a challenging project or a difficult person, we have a perfect opportunity to watch the second arrow. We can notice the feeling of frustration or anger as the first arrow, and then choose not to fire the second arrow of blame, complaint, or self-pity. We can use the difficult colleague as a chance to practice patience and to silently offer a thought of metta, recognizing that their difficult behavior likely comes from their own deep suffering. Even in the most seemingly mundane job, we can find a sense of purpose. By mindfully connecting the dots, we can see how our small, repetitive task contributes to the larger functioning of the organization, and how that organization, in its own way, provides a service to the community. To find this thread of meaning is to transform a job into a calling, a source of contribution, rather than just a source of income. There is a story of a master woodcarver who was famous for the incredible life and spirit that seemed to inhabit his creations. A student asked him for the secret to his art. The master replied, "There is no secret. Before I even begin, I first still my own mind. I fast to quiet the clamor of my desires and ambitions. Then I go into the forest, and I simply look at the trees. I am not looking for a piece of wood to impose my will upon. I am looking for the tree that already contains the form that wishes to be born. When I find it, I can see the finished carving within the living wood. Then, and only then, do I pick up my tools. As I work," he continued, "my mind is completely absorbed. I am not thinking of the money I will receive or the praise I might get. My breath, my hand, my chisel, and the wood become a single, flowing process. The carving simply reveals itself." The profound beauty of his work was not the result of ambition, but of selflessness and total presence. Our work, too, can become a form of meditation when we learn to bring this same quality of quiet, dedicated attention to the process without being fixated on the outcome. This leads us to the final, liberating step of right livelihood, the unhooking of our self-worth from our career. So much of our suffering comes from identifying with our job. We believe, "I am a successful lawyer," or "I am a struggling artist." We fuse our identity with our professional status. This is the wisdom of anatta applied to the workplace. My job title is not me. My performance review is not me. The amount on my paycheck is not me. These are all transient, conditioned phenomena, like clouds passing in the sky. My true work is to maintain a clear mind and a compassionate heart in the midst of all these changing conditions. When we can find our sense of worth in the integrity and mindfulness of our process, rather than in the fleeting external rewards of praise, promotion, or profit, we discover an unshakable freedom. We can work with diligence and passion, but without the desperate, anxious clinging that creates so much stress. We can weather the inevitable ups and downs of any career with the steady balance of the mountain, rather than the frantic reactivity of the leaf in the wind. This deep inquiry into our work, into our relationship with success and failure, inevitably leads us to confront our relationship with money and the material world itself. In a society that relentlessly tells us that more is better, how do we find true wealth? This leads us to explore the radical and peaceful path of contentment and simplicity. Having explored the path of right livelihood, we see how our work can be transformed from a source of stress into a field of practice. But our work is inextricably linked to the concepts of wealth, money, and material possessions. We live in a world that operates on a single, pervasive, and deeply held belief that more is better. The central promise of our consumer culture is that happiness can be purchased. It tells us that the feeling of emptiness or dissatisfaction we carry within us can be cured by acquiring the right object, the newer phone, the faster car, the more fashionable clothes, the bigger house. Our economies are built on this engine of manufactured desire. But this promise is a mirage in the desert, and chasing it is a source of profound dukkha. The wisdom of the Buddha offers a radically different definition of wealth, a path to a richness that cannot be bought or sold. It is the path of santutti, or contentment. To understand the poverty of materialism, we must first understand the psychological trap it sets for us. This mechanism is sometimes called the hedonic treadmill. It begins with a familiar feeling of lack, a vague sense of unease or boredom. The mind, conditioned by thousands of advertisements, quickly identifies an external object that it believes will solve this feeling. If only I had that new watch, it whispers, then I would feel happy and respected. So, we strive, we work harder, we save, and eventually, we purchase the watch. For a brief moment, there is a spike of pleasure, a feeling of satisfaction. The lack has been temporarily filled. But then, something predictable happens. We adapt. The new watch quickly becomes just my watch. The thrill fades, the novelty wears off, and the underlying feeling of lack, which was never truly addressed, returns. Now, the desiring mind simply latches onto a new target. The watch was nice, but what I really need is a new car. Then I will be happy. And so, the treadmill continues. We are running faster and faster, acquiring more and more, yet we remain in the exact same spot emotionally, forever chasing a horizon of satisfaction that constantly recedes as we approach it. This is the poison of greed, lobha, in its purest form. It is a hunger that can never be satiated, because it is not a hunger for things, but a deep spiritual thirst for a peace that no external object can provide. There is a timeless story that illuminates this truth. A powerful king, adorned in silk and jewels, and surrounded by his guards, went to visit a wise old monk who lived in a simple hut at the foot of a mountain. The king was a man who possessed everything the world had to offer: armies, palaces, chests of gold, and immense power. Yet, his face was a mask of worry, and he was known to be a troubled sleeper. The monk, by contrast, owned nothing but the simple cotton robe on his back, a wooden bowl for his daily meal, and a walking stick. Yet, he radiated a palpable aura of peace. He moved with a quiet dignity, and his eyes were clear and bright. He had nothing, yet he seemed to possess everything. The king, deeply perplexed by this paradox, bowed to the monk and asked, "Master, I am a man who has everything, yet I am not happy. My mind is filled with anxiety about my kingdom, my enemies, and the safety of my wealth. You are a man who has nothing, yet you seem to be the most peaceful and contented man I have ever met. What is your secret?" The old monk smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. He invited the king to sit and said, "Your Majesty, our approaches to happiness are opposite. Your happiness is based on addition. You believe that by adding more possessions, more power, and more pleasure to your life, you will finally arrive at a state of contentment. My happiness is based on subtraction. I find my contentment not in what I can acquire, but in what I can let go of. You are trying to fill a bucket that has no bottom. Every time you pour something in, it flows right out. I have realized the simple truth that I do not need the bucket at all. My peace comes not from having more, but from wanting less." The king was silent for a long time, contemplating the monk's words. The monk's wealth was not in his empty hut, but in his mind, which was free from the fever of craving. The king's poverty was not in his treasury, but in his mind, which was a slave to the endless desire for more. This story does not condemn wealth or possessions. The problem is not the objects themselves, but our clinging to them, our deluded belief that they are the source of our well-being. How then do we cultivate this inner wealth of contentment in a world that screams at us to be dissatisfied? We practice it in small, conscious moments throughout our day. The most powerful antidote to the feeling of lack is the active cultivation of gratitude. Before you eat a meal, take just one moment to pause. Look at the food on your plate. Consider all the causes and conditions that had to come together for you to have this nourishment. The sun, the rain, the soil, the farmer who planted the seed, the person who harvested the crop, the one who transported it, the one who prepared it. By connecting with this vast web of interdependence, a simple meal is transformed from a mundane act of consumption into a moment of profound gratitude. We can also practice gratitude for our own bodies. In the course of a busy day, we can pause and appreciate the simple miracle of our own physical being, the heart that beats tirelessly without our command, the lungs that draw in the breath of life, the eyes that can perceive 1,000 shades of green in a single leaf. We take these gifts for granted until they are threatened. To appreciate them now is to taste the wealth of being alive. The practice of contentment is the practice of recognizing the moment of enough. When we are eating, we can learn to listen to our body and stop when we are comfortably satisfied, not when we are painfully full. When we are moved by a desire to buy something, we can create a space for inquiry, asking ourselves, is this a genuine need, or is this a fleeting want, a desire manufactured by the monkey mind? This is not about self-deprivation. It is about self-respect. It is about freeing ourselves from the exhausting tyranny of constant wanting. This is the path to a richness that is not vulnerable to stock market crashes or the whims of fortune. It is a portable peace, an inner treasure that no one can ever take from you, because its source is the quiet, contented mind itself. Our modern world, however, is not just characterized by the consumption of material goods. We are also relentless consumers of something far more intangible and pervasive. We consume information, entertainment, news, and opinions. This consumption directly shapes how we think and, most importantly, how we communicate. Having looked at our relationship with the material world, let us now turn our mindful gaze to our relationship with words and the profound practice of bringing wisdom and compassion to the way we speak. We have journeyed through the inner world, examining our relationship with our work and with the material possessions we so often believe will bring us happiness. We have discovered the profound wealth of contentment, the richness that comes not from acquiring more, but from wanting less. This exploration of consumption naturally leads us to another, more subtle and constant form of consumption in our lives: the consumption of information, ideas, and opinions. And just as material consumption leads to production, this mental consumption leads to its own form of output, a force so powerful it can build kingdoms and destroy them, heal a heart, or shatter it. This is the power of our speech. Words are the tools with which we build our shared reality. With our words, we can weave tapestries of connection, trust, and understanding. A word of encouragement can give someone the strength to persevere through hardship. A sincere apology can mend a broken relationship. A beautifully crafted poem can open a window to the sublime. But these same tools can be used as weapons. A careless piece of gossip can ruin a reputation. A harsh criticism can lodge in a person's heart for years. Divisive rhetoric can turn communities against each other. Recognizing this immense power, the Buddha included right speech, or samavaka, as a cornerstone of the path to liberation. It is the practice of transforming our speech from a reactive habit into a conscious, compassionate, and wise art. The practice of right speech can be understood as guiding our words through 4 gentle but firm gates of inquiry before we allow them to pass from our mind into the world. The first gate is the gate of truth. Before you speak, you ask yourself, is what I am about to say true? This seems simple, but it is a profound discipline. It means more than just avoiding outright lies. It means speaking with factual accuracy, resisting the temptation to exaggerate for dramatic effect, or to bend the truth to our advantage. It means being honest with ourselves about our own motivations and knowledge. In our current age of misinformation, where falsehoods can circle the globe in an instant, this first gate is more critical than ever. To practice right speech is to take responsibility for the truthfulness of the information we share, to be a source of clarity in a world of confusion, not another spreader of rumors. If a statement passes through the first gate, it arrives at the second, the gate of kindness. Here, we ask, is this statement kind? Is it spoken with goodwill? Unquote, 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 unquote. A statement can be factually true, but if it is delivered with the intention to wound, to belittle, or to assert dominance, it is not right speech. It is violence disguised as honesty. This gate asks us to examine the poison of aversion in our hearts. Are we speaking to connect and to help, or are we speaking to attack and to hurt? This doesn't mean we can never speak a difficult truth. Sometimes, the kindest thing we can do is to offer honest feedback, but we do so gently, with the clear intention of being helpful, not harmful, and always at the right time. The third gate is the gate of harmony. Here, we ask, are my words gentle and useful for creating harmony? This gate is the antidote to divisive speech, slander, and gossip. Before speaking about a third person who is not present, we can ask ourselves, will these words bring people closer together, or will they drive a wedge between them? Gossip may provide a fleeting, toxic sense of intimacy with the person we are speaking to, but it does so by creating a triangle of negativity and distrust. It poisons the well of community. Right speech seeks to heal division, to foster understanding, and to create an atmosphere of mutual respect. Finally, If a word has passed through the gates of truth, kindness, and harmony, it arrives at the fourth and final gate, the gate of benefit. Here we ask, is this the right time for this to be said? Is it truly useful or beneficial? This is perhaps the most subtle and skillful gate. A statement could be true, kind, and harmless, but if it is irrelevant or unnecessary, it is simply adding to the noise of the world. This is the filter for idle chatter. It is the pause that prevents us from offering unsolicited advice or from filling a comfortable silence with nervous words. It is the wisdom that understands that sometimes the most skillful and compassionate contribution is no contribution at all. In our digital age, these four gates are our essential guides for navigating the often treacherous world of online communication. The perceived anonymity of the internet can bring out the very worst of our speech habits. We type things to strangers that we would never dream of saying to their face. Before sending that email, posting that comment, or sharing that article, we can create a sacred pause and walk our words through the four gates. A useful modern summary of this practice is the simple acronym THINK. Before you speak or type, ask yourself, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? Is it kind? If our digital communications pass through even a few of these filters, our online world would be a far more sane, compassionate, and intelligent place. The ancient Greek philosopher Socrates taught a similar lesson with his parable of the three sieves. One day, an acquaintance ran up to him, bursting with news. "Socrates," he exclaimed, "I have just heard something about one of your friends." "Hold on a moment," Socrates replied. "Before you tell me, I'd like you to pass your story through three small sieves. The first is the sieve of truth. Have you made absolutely sure that what you are about to tell me is true?" The man looked sheepish. "Well, no," he said. "I just heard it from someone else." "All right," said Socrates. "So you don't know if it's true. Let's try the second sieve, the sieve of goodness. Is what you want to tell me something good?" The man shook his head. "No, on the contrary, it's quite bad." "So," Socrates continued, "you wish to tell me something bad about my friend, which you're not even sure is true. Let us try the third and final sieve, the sieve of usefulness. Will this information be of any use to me?" "No, not really," the man admitted. "Well then," Socrates concluded, "if what you want to tell me is neither true, nor good, nor useful, why tell it to me at all?" This simple wisdom reminds us that right speech is as much about what we don't say as what we do. The practice of noble silentia, silence born not of fear or withdrawal, but of wisdom and discernmentis, a powerful and healing gift, both to ourselves and to those around us. And this conscious use of silence is what allows for the other half of true communication to occur, deep listening. We cannot practice right speech if we are not also practicing right listening. This means offering our full, undivided, and compassionate presence to another, allowing them the space to speak their own truth without interruption, judgment, or the frantic need to formulate our own reply. The way we speak and the way we listen form the very fabric of our human connection. They are the threads with which our relationships are either woven into a beautiful tapestry of trust or tangled into a painful knot of misunderstanding. Having explored this art of mindful communication, let us now broaden our focus to see how all these practices, mindful presence, a compassionate heart, and wise speech can help us to navigate the most important and often most challenging area of our lives, our relationships with others. Having learned to cultivate a wiser and more compassionate way of communicating, we now arrive at the great arena where right speech and all the other qualities of the heart are most profoundly tested. Our relationships, our connections with our partners, our families, and our dearest friends are the source of life's greatest joys, but they are also, so often, the source of our deepest sorrows and most painful suffering. It is in our relationships that our attachments are stickiest, our fears are most raw, and our unhealed wounds are most easily triggered. It is here that the practice moves from the meditation cushion directly into the fire of the human heart. The wisdom of this path offers us a way to transform our relationships from a source of anxious, clinging, and painful conflict into a vehicle for mutual growth, freedom, and profound love. At the heart of this transformation lies a fundamental distinction between two very different kinds of love. The first, and more common kind, is a love based on attachment and need. It is the love of the hungry ghost, the love of the unfilled self. This love says, I love you because you make me happy. I love you because you complete me, because you fill a void within me. My well-being depends on you. While it may feel intense and passionate, this love is rooted in the poison of greed, of lobha. It is a love that seeks to possess, to consume, and because it is rooted in our own sense of lack, it is constantly haunted by the fear of loss. This fear is what gives rise to jealousy, to possessiveness, to control, and to a constant, anxious monitoring of the other person. We try to put the one we love into a gilded cage, hoping to secure our own happiness by limiting their freedom. This is not true love. It is a transaction, a contract of dependency that inevitably leads to suffering for everyone involved. The second kind of love is a love based on wisdom and freedom. It is the love that flows from a heart that has cultivated the four divine abodes. This love is not about what we can get from another, but about what we can offer. It is a love that says, I wish for you to be happy, which is metta. It says, I wish for you to be free from your suffering, which is karuna. It says, I rejoice in your successes and your joy, which is mudita. And most importantly, it says, I offer you this love freely, and I give you the space to be exactly who you are, without needing you to be a certain way for my own sake, which is upekkha. This is a love not of possession, but of appreciation. It is not a love that seeks to fill a hole in ourselves, but a love that comes from a sense of fullness, a desire to share the peace and joy we have cultivated within our own garden. This love does not cage the other person. It helps them to fly. The great Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh, taught that loving another person is like learning to care for a flower. You cannot simply acquire a flower and demand that it give you beauty and fragrance. To love the flower, you must first learn to understand it. You must practice looking deeply to see its true nature and its real needs. Does this flower need direct sunlight or gentle shade? Does it need a lot of water or just a little? If you give it too much water out of a misguided sense of generosity, you will drown its roots and kill it. To love a person, then, requires this same deep looking and listening. The greatest gift you can give to another is your understanding. When you can say to your partner or your friend, I see you, I understand your suffering, I understand your joy, you are offering them the most nourishing water of all. A flower also needs space. Its roots need room to spread out in the soil. Its leaves need space to reach for the light. If you try to contain it in a pot that is too small, or crowd it with other plants, it will be stunted and unhealthy. In the same way, a healthy relationship requires space. The romantic ideal of two people merging into one, of losing all boundaries, is not a recipe for love, but for suffocation. True love honors the individuality of the other. It grants both people the space to have their own thoughts, their own friends, their own periods of solitude. It is a connection between two whole individuals, not two broken halves trying to make a whole. And finally, to love a flower, you must love it for what it is. You cannot plant a rose and then become angry at it for not being a lotus. To do so is an act of violence against its nature. True love is to see the roseness of the person you love, their unique qualities, their strengths, and their weaknesses, and to help them to become the most beautiful, authentic rose they can be, not to try and reshape them into the flower you wish they were. How do we practice this in our day-to-day interactions? We begin with the practices we have already explored. We practice right speech and deep listening. When your loved one speaks to you, give them the rare and precious gift of your full, undivided attention. Put down your phone, turn away from the television. Let your mind become a calm and spacious place for their words to land. Listen not just to form your reply, but with the sole intention of understanding them more deeply. And when you speak, speak with the intention to create harmony, to understand, and to heal. We can also make a conscious effort to water the flowers in the other person. Our minds have a strong negativity bias. We are often quick to notice our partner's flaws and mistakes. The practice is to intentionally shift our focus to their positive qualities. When they do something kind, acknowledge it. When you appreciate something about them, say so. By watering these positive seeds with your attention and your words, you help them to grow, and you transform the entire atmosphere of the relationship. The deepest practice of all is letting go of control. It is the application of upekkha, or equanimity, to our connections. It is the radical acceptance that we cannot control another person's thoughts, feelings, or choices. We can influence, we can request, we can share our own feelings, but we cannot control. To try to do so is a futile battle against another person's freedom, and it is a guaranteed path to frustration and resentment. The practice is to release that tight grip of expectation, to love with an open hand. This is not indifference. It is the ultimate expression of trust in the other person, and trust in our own ability to handle the beautiful, messy, and unpredictable reality of a relationship between two free individuals. A mindful relationship, then, is not about two people leaning on each other so much that they cannot stand on their own. It is about two strong trees growing side by side. Their roots may intertwine deep in the soil, and their branches may offer each other comfort and shade, but they each stand on their own, reaching for the sun. This vision of love, based on freedom and understanding, is a beautiful ideal, but we know that the reality of our relationships is often far more challenging. They are the crucibles in which our deepest insecurities and our most painful emotions are brought to the surface. Conflict is inevitable. Misunderstandings happen. Anger, fear, jealousy, and sadness will arise. Having explored the vision of a healthy, mindful relationship, we must now turn our attention to the essential and practical question of what to do when things go wrong. How do we skillfully and compassionately work with these powerful and difficult emotions when they surge through us, so that they become opportunities for growth rather than instruments of destruction? We have explored the beautiful ideal of a mindful relationship, one founded on freedom, understanding, and a love that does not seek to possess. But life is not an ideal. It is a messy, beautiful, and unpredictable reality. And in the crucible of our most intimate connections, it is inevitable that we will encounter conflict, misunderstanding, and pain. It is here that we come face to face with the most powerful and often most frightening energies of our inner world, the raw force of our own difficult emotions: anger, fear, jealousy, grief, and sadness. For most of our lives, We react to these powerful feelings in one of two unskillful ways. The first is suppression. We are taught that strong emotions are a sign of weakness. We push them down. We deny their existence. We put on a brave face and tell ourselves and the world that we are fine. But the suppressed energy does not disappear. It turns inward, creating a toxic inner environment of anxiety, depression, and a vague but persistent feeling of being fundamentally numb. The second unskillful reaction is to be completely consumed by the emotion. We become the anger. We are hijacked by its energy, and it dictates our every word and action. We lash out. We say things we later regret. We slam doors, and we cause harm to ourselves and to the people we love. The path of wisdom offers a third way, a middle way that is neither suppression nor indulgence. It is the path of mindful, compassionate attention. The first step in this practice is to fundamentally reframe our relationship with our emotions. They are not our enemies. They are not flaws to be eliminated. They are not signs that we have failed in our spiritual practice. A difficult emotion is simply energy, and it is also an intelligent messenger. Anger is a messenger that often tells us that a boundary has been violated or that we are witnessing an injustice. Fear is a messenger that alerts us to a perceived threat, either to our physical safety or to our psychological well-being. Sadness is a messenger that signals a loss, and it tells us that we need time to grieve and to heal. The problem is not the messenger itself. The problem is that we have a lifelong habit of either shooting the messenger as soon as it arrives, suppression, or allowing the messenger to take over the entire house and burn it to the ground, acting out. The mindful path is to learn how to calmly receive the messenger, listen to its message, and then let it go on its way. The Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh offers the most beautiful and helpful analogy for this practice. He teaches us to treat our strong emotions like a crying baby. Imagine you are meditating peacefully, and from another room in your house, you begin to hear the sound of a baby crying. The sound is insistent, powerful, and demands your attention. This is the difficult emotion arising. One option is to close the door, turn up the music, and try to ignore it. This is suppression, but the baby is still crying, and now your whole house is filled with the tension of your resistance. Another option is to become overwhelmed by the sound, to start crying yourself, and to run around in a panic. This is acting out. Neither of these approaches helps the baby. The wise and compassionate response is to practice like a loving parent. You stop what you are doing. You get up and you walk toward the sound. You open the door to the room. The first step is simply recognition. You look at the crying baby and you say, "Ah, there you are. I see you." In the same way, when anger arises, you turn your attention inward and you say, "Hello, anger. I know you are there." The next step is to gently pick the baby up and hold it in your arms. This is the practice of acceptance. You don't judge the baby or scold it for crying. You simply accept the reality that it is in distress and needs your care. You hold your anger, your fear, your sadness in the same way, not judging it, not blaming yourself for it, but simply accepting its presence as part of your human experience. Then, what do you do with the crying baby in your arms? You hold it tenderly. You cradle it. You might rock it gently or hum a soft tune. You use the energy of your own calm and your own love to soothe the baby. This is the practice of using your mindful breath. As you hold the feeling of anger in your awareness, you breathe with it. You breathe in, and you are aware of the anger. You breathe out, and you try to soften the tension around it. You are not trying to force the anger to go away. You are simply holding it in the vast, warm, and compassionate embrace of your mindfulness, just as you would hold the crying child. And what happens when a baby is held with such tenderness and care? Eventually, its crying subsides. It feels seen, understood, and safe. In the same way, when we hold our strong emotions with this quality of kind attention, their raw, destructive energy naturally begins to calm down. They feel the safety of our own presence, and they begin to quiet. Let us walk through a concrete example. Imagine a friend makes a critical comment that feels unfair. The first arrow strikes. Immediately, you feel a hot, surging energy in your chest and your jaw clenches. This is the energy of anger arising. The unskillful reaction would be to immediately lash back with a sarcastic comment, or to swallow your anger and stew in resentment for the rest of the day. The mindful path is to first pause. You take one conscious breath. This breath is a moment of freedom, a space between the stimulus and your response. In that space, you turn your attention inward. You practice recognition. Hello, anger. I feel you here. You cradle this crying baby. As you breathe with the anger, holding it in your awareness, you can then practice insight, or vipassana. You can look more deeply into the nature of this anger. What is underneath it? Very often, anger is a secondary emotion, a protective shield for something more vulnerable. As you look, you might find a deep feeling of hurt, a feeling of being misunderstood or disrespected. Or you might find fear, the fear that what your friend said is true, the fear of not being good enough. The anger is just the guard dog barking loudly to protect this soft, wounded part of you. When you see this, your relationship to the anger changes completely. It is no longer a monstrous enemy, but a misguided protector. As you continue to hold it and breathe with it, its energy will naturally subside. And now, from this place of greater calm and clarity, you can choose a wise response. You may decide to use right speech and say calmly, "When you said that, I felt hurt." Or you may see that the comment came from your friend's own pain and decide that the most compassionate response is to say nothing at all. The key is that you are now responding from a place of freedom and wisdom, not reacting from a place of blind, habitual rage. The more we practice this, the more we realize that we are not our emotions. Our emotions are like clouds passing through the sky of our mind. Sometimes they are white and fluffy. Sometimes they are dark and stormy. But our true nature is not the cloud. It is the vast, open, clear sky itself. The sky is never harmed or stained by even the most violent storm. To practice is to learn to rest in our sky-like nature, allowing the weather of our lives to come and to go. This skill of holding our own inner storms prepares us to face life's greatest challenges with grace. And of all the difficult emotions we must learn to embrace, none are more powerful or more universal than the feelings of grief and fear that surround the ultimate impermanence of all things, the reality of loss, separation, and death itself. We have learned to sit with the storms of our own hearts, to cradle our anger and fear with a tender, mindful presence. We have cultivated the strength to face difficult emotions without being consumed by them. This practice now prepares us to turn our compassionate awareness toward the greatest of all human fears, the ultimate expression of impermanence, the one reality that our modern culture works so tirelessly to deny, hide, and sanitize. We must now talk about death. In our world, death is treated as a failure, an accident, an emergency. We speak of it in hushed tones and euphemisms. We fight it with all our might, and we shield ourselves from its reality, as if by not looking at it, we might somehow avoid it. But this deep aversion, this pushing away of an inevitable truth, creates a pervasive, low-grade fear that hums just beneath the surface of our lives. It is the source of so much of our anxiety, our desperate clinging to youth, and our frantic accumulation of things we cannot possibly keep. The Buddhist path offers a profoundly different approach, not to run from death, but to turn towards it with calm, steady, and courageous attention. This is the practice of maranasati, the mindfulness of death, and far from being morbid, it is one of the most powerful practices for living a life of joy, meaning, and purpose. The primary fear that fuels our aversion to death is the terror of annihilation, the belief that we will simply be extinguished, erased from existence. Our ego, this constructed sense of a solid, separate self, cannot imagine its own non-existence, and it recoils from the thought in horror. But the wisdom of interconnection offers us a more peaceful and realistic perspective. Consider a single cloud floating in the vast blue sky. It has its own unique shape, its own beauty, its own story. Then, after a while, its form dissipates, and it is no longer visible as a cloud. Did the cloud die, or has it simply transformed? The water that composed the cloud has become invisible vapor, or it has fallen as rain. That rain may have nourished a tree, or flowed into a stream, then a river, and finally to the great ocean. From the ocean, it will one day evaporate and rise again to form a new cloud. There was no real birth and no real death. There was only a ceaseless and beautiful transformation of form. The Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh, invites us to see our own lives in the same way, using the simile of a wave on the ocean. A wave is born from the sea. It rises up, taking on a unique and beautiful form. It has its own identity, its own journey, its own life. It travels across the surface of the water, and then, inevitably, it crashes upon the shore and disappears. From the limited perspective of the wave, this is a terrifying end. It is the cessation of its entire being. But from the perspective of the ocean, nothing has been lost. The wave was never separate from the ocean in the first place. Its true nature, its ultimate substance, was always water. The water was not born when the wave arose, and it did not die when the wave subsided. It simply changed its form for a little while. Our life is like that wave. This personality, this body, this story we call me, is the temporary form of the wave. But our true nature is the ocean of life itself. To understand this is to be liberated from the fear of annihilation. The wave may dissolve, but the water remains. The practice of maranasati, or mindfulness of death, is not about dwelling on gruesome images, but about holding a few key contemplations gently in our awareness. The first is that death is absolutely certain for every one of us. No one in the history of humanity has escaped it. Wealth cannot buy you an exemption. Power cannot command it to stay away. It is the great equalizer, the one condition that unites every single living being. To contemplate this cuts through our pride, our arrogance, and our sense of entitlement. It reminds us of our shared, fragile humanity. The second contemplation is that the time of our death is completely uncertain. We may live for another 50 years, or we may not live through this day. We plan for our retirement, but we cannot be certain we will reach it. We put off important conversations, thinking, there will be time tomorrow, but there may not be. To hold this uncertainty in our minds is not a cause for morbid fear, but for a vibrant sense of urgency. It shakes us out of our complacency and procrastination. It urges us to live fully, right now, because now is the only time we are guaranteed to have. The third, and most transformative, contemplation is that at the moment of death, the only things of any real value are the qualities we have cultivated in our own hearts and minds. Our car, our house, our degrees, our reputation, our social media following, all of it will be left behind. The only thing that truly belongs to us is our karma, the accumulated imprints of our actions, the state of our own consciousness. Will our mind be filled with the energy of peace, love, and wisdom, or will it be filled with the energy of regret, anger, and fear? To contemplate this clarifies our priorities like nothing else. Suddenly, the petty arguments, the grudges we hold, the desperate chase for more status and more stuff, all of it is revealed in its true, insignificant light. What becomes important? To tell the people we love that we love them, to forgive and to ask for forgiveness, to be a little kinder to the stranger at the store, to spend less time worrying and more time appreciating, to live a life that we will not regret on our final day. This wisdom also transforms how we hold the painful experience of losing a loved one. The practice does not ask us to be superhuman, to not feel the sharp pain of grief. Grief is the natural expression of love. It is the first arrow, and its pain must be honored and allowed. The practice helps us to avoid the second arrows of complicated grief, the endless guilt, the bitter regret, the anger at the universe. We learn to see that while our loved one's physical form, their wave, has dissolved, their being, their water, continues in countless ways. Their love, their teachings, their laughter, their influence, these things have not disappeared. They continue in us, in the memories we hold, and in the ways our lives were changed by having known them. The most powerful way to honor their memory is to live out the beautiful qualities they embodied. If they were generous, we can practice more generosity in their name. If they were joyful, we can cultivate more joy as a tribute to them. In this way, they never truly leave us. Death, then, is not life's enemy. It is not a medical failure. Death is life's most profound and honest teacher. It teaches us about impermanence. It teaches us to cherish the astonishing, unrepeatable gift of this very moment. It teaches us what truly matters. By learning to face death with a calm and open heart, we learn how to live with fearless and boundless love. We have now confronted the deepest challenges of the human conditioner, own difficult emotions, and the great mystery of our own mortality. We have gathered a rich collection of practices and perspectives for navigating the inevitable storms of life with wisdom and grace. The question now becomes one of synthesis. How do we bring all of this together? How do we walk a path through our daily lives that skillfully balances effort and ease, joy and sorrow, the needs of the world and the needs of our own heart? The guiding principle for this great integration is the timeless and profoundly practical teaching of the Majjhima Patipada, the middle way. We have been taught to think of joy as a grand finale, the fireworks at the end of a long and arduous show. It is the graduation ceremony, the wedding day, the promotion, the purchase of a new home. We build our lives around these distant peaks of celebration, and in doing so, we learn to endure the vast, sprawling valleys in between. We treat the ordinary moments of our lives as mere rehearsals, as the necessary but uninteresting prelude to the main event. We tell ourselves that happiness is something to be earned, a reward that waits for us at the finish line of our striving. And so, we run, we climb, we push, we accumulate, often arriving at these designated moments of joy, only to feel a strange and hollow echo, a sense that the feeling we were chasing is not quite as advertised, a fleeting phantom that vanishes almost as soon as it appears. What if this entire model is flawed? What if joy is not a destination, but a way of traveling? What if peace is not a prize to be won, but a muscle to be developed? The wisdom of the path we have been exploring does not offer a new destination, a more spectacular peak to conquer. Instead, it offers a radical reorientation. It invites us to stop, to breathe, and to look around, to discover that the treasure we have been seeking is not hidden in some far-off future, but is scattered like jewels all around us, disguised as the ordinary fabric of our daily lives. This is the practice of finding joy in simplicity, the silent celebration. It is the culmination of everything we have discussed, the point where understanding dissolves into being. It is the antidote to the hungry ghost of craving, the restless demon of tanha that is never satisfied. Our modern world is an engine designed to fuel this craving. It creates an artificial scarcity of joy, telling us that what we have is not enough, that who we are is not enough. The advertisement for the new car implies your current one is a source of shame. The curated perfection on social media suggests your own life is messy and lacking. This system perpetuates a low-grade, constant state of dissatisfaction, a background hum of inadequacy that keeps us consuming, striving, and searching for the next thing that will finally make us feel complete. But it is a promise that can never be kept, because the engine requires our continued hunger to function. The moment we feel truly content is the moment we step off the hamster wheel and the entire illusion shudders. Finding joy in simplicity is a quiet rebellion against this engine. It is the conscious act of withdrawing our attention from the grand, noisy narrative of what is missing and placing it gently on the small, silent miracle of what is present. It begins with the senses, the immediate gateways to the present moment. It is the feeling of warm water on your hands as you wash the dishes, not as a chore to be rushed through, but as a cascade of sensation. It is the taste of a simple slice of bread, the complex alchemy of grain and yeast and heat, a moment of nourishment that is, in itself, a complete and perfect event. It is the profound comfort in a cup of tea, the warmth seeping into your palms, the steam carrying a fragrant aroma, the subtle taste on your tongue. In that moment, with that cup of tea, nothing else is required for contentment. The universe of your experience is full. This is not poetry, it is a trainable skill. It is the application of mindfulness, of sati, to the texture of reality. When you are truly present with an experience, you are not judging it, not comparing it, not trying to improve it. You are simply allowing it to be what it is, and in that allowing, you discover a richness you had previously overlooked. The sound of rain against a window pane ceases to be a dreary backdrop and becomes a complex, soothing percussion. The feeling of sunlight on your skin is no longer taken for granted, but becomes a direct experience of the energy that fuels our entire world, a silent, warm embrace. There is a famous Zen story about a master before and after enlightenment. Before he was enlightened, he said, he chopped wood and carried water. After he was enlightened, he said, he chopped wood and carried water. From the outside, nothing had changed. He performed the same mundane tasks, but from the inside, everything was different. Before, chopping wood was a means to an end, a chore to get firewood. Carrying water was a necessity to have something to drink. But after, each swing of the axe, each step with the water buckets, was the whole of the universe. The act of chopping wood was not for anything. It was a complete expression of the present moment, a dance of muscle and wood and steel. The act of carrying water was a moving meditation, a perfect balance of effort and grace. This story beautifully illustrates the essence of finding joy in simplicity. The goal is not to escape our ordinary lives, but to become fully present within them. The peace we seek is not in a monastery on a distant mountain, but in the way we wash our teacup after drinking from it. It is about transforming our relationship with the mundane, seeing the sacred in the so-called profane. When you can find fulfillment in the simple act of folding your laundry, or walking to the mailbox, or listening to the sounds of your neighborhood at dusk, you have found a source of joy that is infinite and inexhaustible. It is a joy that depends on nothing external, a wellspring of peace that arises from within. It is crucial to understand that simplicity, in this context, is not about poverty, lack, or self-deprivation. This is not a call to renounce the world and live in austerity. It is about the practice of skillful sufficiency. Skillful sufficiency is the wisdom to know what is truly enough. It is the process of looking honestly at our lives, at our possessions, at our commitments, and asking a simple question: does this nourish me? Does this bring a sense of ease and freedom, or does it bring a sense of burden and complication? The culture of more tells us that happiness lies in addition, in acquiring more things, more responsibilities, more status. But often, true freedom and joy are found in subtraction. It is the relief of letting go of the possessions that we must clean and store and ensure. It is the lightness that comes from declining a commitment that would drain our energy. It is the peace of being free from the constant pressure to upgrade, to compete, to display a certain image to the world. Skillful sufficiency is an act of deep self-compassion. It is creating a life that is not cluttered with non-essentials, a life where there is space to breathe, space to be, space to simply enjoy the profound gift of existence. This is a wealth that cannot be measured in a bank account. It is the wealth of time, the wealth of peace of mind, the wealth of a heart that is not constantly grasping for more. It is the realization that you already have everything you need to be happy, right here, right now. This practice is the final, gentle dissolving of the chains of craving. When you can look at a field of grass and feel a sense of richness, when you can listen to the birds and feel a sense of joy, the frantic need for something else begins to fade. The silent celebration of the present moment becomes the only celebration you truly need. It is always available, always here, waiting patiently for you to arrive. We have journeyed far, tracing the unseen architecture of our lives through the law of karma, the profound principle of action and consequence. We have seen that we are not passive victims of fate, but active creators of our experience, planting seeds with every thought, every word, every deed. But where does this path of skillful action ultimately lead? What is the harvest we are truly tending? The goal is not simply to accumulate good karma, to trade a life of suffering for a life of pleasant rewards. The ultimate aim is to transcend the entire game of gain and loss, to find a freedom so profound that it is not shaken by any circumstance. This is the final and most integrated stage of the path, the shift from merely practicing these principles to becoming a living embodiment of them. This is the journey of becoming the lighthouse. In the beginning, our practice feels like a distinct activity. We set aside time to meditate, a small island of peace in the turbulent ocean of our day. We apply mindfulness like a tool, using it to navigate a difficult conversation or a stressful moment at work. This is necessary. It is the building of the raft. But there comes a point where the practice begins to seep into the very fabric of our being. The boundary between meditation time and lifetime begins to dissolve. The awareness cultivated on the cushion starts to permeate our every action, whether we are washing dishes, walking down the street, or listening to a friend. We stop doing mindfulness, and we start being mindful. We stop practicing compassion, and we simply become compassionate. This is the maturation of the path, where the tools are no longer separate from the user, where the wisdom is no longer a concept we understand, but a light that shines from within us. Imagine a lighthouse standing on a rocky shore. The ocean around it is wild and unpredictable. Sometimes it is calm and glassy, reflecting the sun. At other times, colossal waves crash against the rocks, driven by ferocious winds. The lighthouse does not try to calm the ocean. It knows it cannot. The lighthouse does not lament the storm or desperately wish for the calm to return. Its function is not to control the world, but to hold its ground and to shine. Its foundation, sunk deep into the bedrock, is its wisdom, its unshakable understanding of impermanence, of non-self, of the nature of reality. Its sturdy structure, built to withstand any weather, is its ethical conduct, its commitment to non-harming in thought, word, and deed, and the brilliant, penetrating light that it casts out into the darkness, guiding ships safely to harbor, is its cultivated mind, the unwavering flame of mindfulness and concentration. To become the lighthouse is to accept that the storms of life are inevitable. The waves of gain and loss, of praise and blame, of pleasure and pain will always come. Peace is not the absence of these waves. Peace is the stability of the lighthouse that stands firm among them, its light of awareness undiminished by the surrounding turmoil. This unshakable stability has a name in the Buddhist tradition. It is called upekkha, which is often translated as equanimity. It is the fourth and crowning jewel of the sublime states, alongside loving kindness, compassion, and sympathetic joy. But equanimity can be misunderstood. It is not cold indifference, apathy, or emotional detachment. Indifference says, "I don't care." Equanimity says, "I care deeply, but my inner peace is not conditional on the outcome." It is a spacious, vast, and balanced heart, born of profound wisdom. It is the ability to see the bigger picture, to understand the intricate dance of cause and effect, and to meet all of life's experiences with a steady and open mind. This path cultivates resilience against what are known as the 8 worldly winds, the forces that constantly push and pull the untrained mind, keeping it in a state of agitation. The first pair is gain and loss. We are elated when we gain wealth, status, or possessions, and we are devastated when we lose them. The second is praise and blame. We feel inflated by the praise of others and crushed by their criticism, making our self-worth dependent on external validation. The third is fame and disgrace. We become intoxicated by being known and popular, and we live in fear of being shamed or forgotten. And the final pair is pleasure and pain. We spend our lives chasing pleasant sensory experiences and running from unpleasant ones. A mind without equanimity is like a leaf tossed about by these 8 winds, never finding a moment of rest. But a mind imbued with equanimity is like a deep, ancient mountain. The winds still blow, sometimes with hurricane force, but the mountain remains unmoved. It feels the wind, it acknowledges its presence, but it is not uprooted. Upekkha is this rootedness, this profound inner balance that allows us to participate fully in life, with all its joys and sorrows, without being thrown off center. There is a beautiful and potent metaphor for this entire journey of transformation: the lotus flower. The life of the lotus begins not in the light, but in the dark, murky mud at the bottom of a pond. This mud represents all of our human suffering, our confusion, our greed, our anger, our messy, complicated lives. The seed of awakening does not reject the mud. It does not try to escape it. Instead, it embeds itself within it, and it uses the thick, nutrient-rich mud as its very source of nourishment. From this acceptance, a stem begins to grow, making its slow, determined journey upward through the cloudy water. This represents our practice, our path, with all its moments of clarity and its periods of confusion. Finally, the stem breaks the surface of the water, and the bud opens to the sunlight and the open air. It blossoms into a flower of exquisite beauty and fragrance, its petals pristine and pure, completely unstained by the mud from which it came. This is our human potential: to live in the world, to be nourished by its challenges, to grow through our own suffering, and ultimately, to blossom with a wisdom and compassion that is untouched and untarnished by the very conditions that gave rise to it. We do not need to escape the mud of our lives. We need only to learn how to grow through it. When this inner transformation takes place, when the heart finds the balance of equanimity and the mind is illuminated by wisdom, our relationship with the world changes fundamentally. Service to others is no longer felt as a duty, a chore, or a strategy for earning merit. It becomes the natural, spontaneous, and joyful expression of a transformed heart. When you see with clarity, you understand that the separation between self and other is a porous, manufactured boundary. You realize that your happiness is inextricably linked to the happiness of all beings. The suffering of another is no longer their problem. It is felt as a resonance in your own heart. And so, helping becomes as natural as breathing. Compassionate action flows from you without strain or calculation. Like water from a mountain spring, you become a lighthouse not for your own sake, but for the sake of all ships navigating the dark and stormy sea. Your peace becomes a gift to the world. Your clarity becomes a light for others. This is the final fruition of the path, where the personal quest for liberation blossoms into a universal offering of love and service. To become the lighthouse is to realize that your own deepest freedom is found in lighting the way for everyone else. We began our journey together with an image, the image of a person running on a treadmill, moving with great effort, but arriving nowhere. It was a metaphor for a feeling so many of us know intimately, a quiet hum of anxiety, a sense of being caught in a relentless cycle of striving and dissatisfaction. We were running, but without a true direction, often chasing a horizon of happiness that seemed to recede with every step we took. From that place of shared understanding, we embarked on a different kind of journey, not one of acceleration, but of attention. We stepped off the machine. Together, we walked a path illuminated by an ancient wisdom. We began with a courageous diagnosis, looking directly at the pervasive nature of our discontent, the universal truth of dukkha. We didn't turn away from it, but rather investigated its origins, discovering that its roots lay deep in the soil of our own minds, in the unquenchable thirst of craving and the clinging to things that are, by their very nature, always changing. We explored the profound and liberating truths of impermanence and non-self, realizing that our suffering comes not from life itself, but from our resistance to how life is. We were given a map, the Four Noble Truths, and a practical guide for the journey, the Noble Eightfold Path. This was not a path of blind faith, but of direct experience. We learned to anchor ourselves in the present moment with the simple, reliable rhythm of our own breath. We learned to sit quietly and watch the ceaseless theater of our own minds, not as a helpless actor caught in the drama, but as the calm, non-judgmental audience. We learn to befriend our most difficult emotions, to hold our anger, fear, and sorrow with a gentle and spacious awareness, allowing them to arise and pass away without becoming them. We cultivated the boundless qualities of the heart, learning that compassion is not a finite resource, but an infinite wellspring within us. And now, as we reach the end of this shared time, the single most important message to carry forward is this: peace is not a destination. It is not a prize to be won at the end of a long struggle, nor is it a commodity to be acquired. It is not hiding in a future circumstance, a different job, a perfect relationship, or a quieter world. Peace is a quality of awareness. It is a state of being that is available to you right here, right now, in the midst of your life exactly as it is. The wisdom of this path does not offer an escape from reality. It offers a doorway into a more intimate, authentic, and free relationship with reality. It is about finding stillness in the storm, not waiting for the storm to pass. The journey does not end with this video. It truly begins now, in the quiet moments of your own life. You have all the tools you need. They are not external to you. They are your very birthright. Your breath is your constant anchor to the present moment. Your body is the sacred ground of your practice. Your mind is the laboratory where you can discover the nature of freedom. And your heart holds a boundless capacity for kindness, for yourself, and for all others. Walk this path, not with the grim determination of a runner on a treadmill, but with the gentle curiosity of an explorer. Be patient. Be kind to yourself when you stumble. The point is not to achieve perfection, but to continue, step by step, breath by breath, with an open and courageous heart. The peace you seek is not somewhere else. It has been waiting for you, all along, in the quiet center of your own being.